is on the list of people with technical difficulties this morning, and so therefore wasn't able to make it. But I do want that noted that he put in his apologies, and as soon as Mr. Murphy is on his way in now. Can you hear us, David?
Yeah. Your Worship, we're just going to contact Mr. Murphy and see what the issue is.
It's fine. He appears to be on the phone. We can see him, we just can't hear him.
Yeah, I'm wondering if his sound's down actually on his computer and not just Zoom.
I am not the one to ask.
Lauren's just providing him with some technical assistance.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, yep. So can you hear me now? Okay.
I've been trying to talk to you and I've muted myself, but we can hear you, David.
Good. So can I start making my submission?
It would have been difficult earlier.
Okay.
Yeah, the next 5 minutes are yours, should you require them.
All right. I'll start anyway. And thank you for this opportunity. This technology is very new to me. But in the submission, I'd like to ask Council to consider the possibility of extending the season of the saltwater pool into the month of April. Back in February this year, I launched a petition to gauge interest for this idea amongst pool users. And in 10 days, I received 220 signatures in support of extending the season from a wide and diversified range of users. However, over the past 15 years of swimming at the saltwater pool, I've spoken to people from all corners of the globe who voiced very positively the unique and special attributes of this facility. The warm saltwater pool, the fresh air, the cafe, and the wonderful vista out to sea. And they considered it a real gem for the city of Dunedin. The whole complex with the esplanade and beach over the warmer months provide a very positive vibe and community hub for Dunedin locals. However, with global warming over the past few years, this has meant that April has provided us with warmer and more mild weather conditions. And just a week or so, there were around about 1,000 people enjoying the beach in the Esplanade area. So I'm wondering, when renewing the pool staff contracts for next season, could the council consider the flexibility to be more nimble and perhaps look at factoring in the possibility of an extended season through the month of April? Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that. You happy to take questions?
Yes.
Sir?
Yes.
Councillor Houlihan, who you'll see has sensitively chosen her background accordingly.
Okay.
A question for you.
Well, you're going to get no opposition from me, but given my screen, exactly, I love it. I think, have you got any research to show that the weather seems to be a bit better in April? I mean, I think it does.
I do. It's just really my own experience and the experience of other people that have been long-time users of this beach area and the saltwater pool. We reluctantly hang up our togs and walk away from the complex, and this lovely warm weather continues on through the month of April.
Yeah, I agree. It's a fabulous, wonderful pool. I hear you. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Well, we could get weather reports from NIWA over the past few years, I guess.
I think the challenge with weather forecasting is that it's becoming increasingly unpredictable, and that's not likely to change. But I've got questions from Councillor Lord and Councillor O'Malley.
Thank you.
Yeah, hi David. Thanks for coming in, or well, staying there actually. But thanks for submitting. My question's around you made the comment about staff contracts and being nimble, because I think that is probably an area where it's easy to set budgets when you know something's going to go a certain time. So what's your views in terms of if you did get and I know we've had a particularly nice autumn this year, but what if we get into a situation where we have a real cold autumn? Would you be equally happy to shut it early?
Oh, look, I think so. If it started off the month of April and it was cold, wet, blustery weather, I think we'd have to apply logic to the situation and just shut the pool early. Nobody would want to see the pool opening for no users at all. It would be very costly. I think most people will acknowledge that.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor O'Malley.
Just a comment actually to the NIWA statement. NIWA came out with a press release in November 2017 saying that winter in New Zealand is actually 30 days shorter than it was 100 years ago. So there is actually data to say that the winter is compressing and that the seasons either side of it are getting longer.
Yes. Yep.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, sorry. I just said thank you.
Yeah. No,
Further questions?
I would agree with that.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy, for your clear submission.
So yeah, that's all right. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and I hope that council might look forward to considering this possibility, the flexibility of it.
Next time we speak, hopefully it'll be in a slightly simpler setting.
I do too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
$2:00.
You find that it was.
Yes, yeah, I think I've worked out the problem is. I'll come to you in a second about it.
We have Dr. Bold in the waiting room.
Yep, that's an issue.
You're on mute, Nikki, but as soon as you find that button, the next 5 minutes are all yours.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, councillors and mayor. I appreciate your time here. I just wanted to present on behalf of our food network. We're a community organisation that's been going for about 4 or 5 years now. We've got 458 members, so I'm speaking on behalf of our members. You've got our written submission, so I'm not going to repeat it all, but some of the key things that I really wanted to highlight today with you is obviously we've just been through a crazy situation, currently still in it, and it's really highlighted for us the seriousness of food resilience. And of course, essential services such as supermarkets have been open and are still selling food, but it's really hit our local small producers really hard, as often they sell food through places like the farmers market or direct to restaurants, both of which immediately closed. And that's really affected them. And we can't afford to lose our local food growers. If we lose them, it's very difficult to get them back. And so I really feel like this situation has highlighted something that we need to think about and prepare for in the future. So this really brings us to the nub of where we think council has a role. And we do have a Good Food Dunedin coordinator. And we really believe that there's a lot of work that this position can do with regards to food resilience in the future. We highlight in our submission how we actually think the placement of the Good Food Dunedin role is actually incorrect. Currently sits in Enterprise Dunedin, and we believe that it needs to move. It needs to be more at the heart of council, we think, within either policy or community development, mainly because food has got to be across all of council. It can't just be in economic development looking at those businesses to improve. We need to have it right in the policy, right at the very start, right at the heart, or in that community development. So there are some of the key things that we talked about. The other thing I think is really important to mention here is the budget for that role used to be 10,000 to be able to give to help food within Dunedin. That's been cut down to 8,000, and we all within our food network want to really push the fact that we don't want this cut any further. We know that things are going to be tight, absolutely, but it's so important that food and our food producers in Dunedin are looked after. So we can't have that cut. And we, again, just as an example, if a local business wanted to look after one community fruit orchard, food for 3 years, which is really what you need to do in order to ensure the long-term health of the trees, that's approximately $9,000. So $8,000 is nothing really, and it's only a half-time role as well. So we think that's really important. And in our submission, we have given you some key strategies that have come from overseas as well to really try and help look after our our local food producers. So that's really what I wanted to emphasize today. And we also really want to support the waste minimisation and management plan. We think that there's a lot of amazing work going on in there. We also really want to support the climate change. It is absolutely vital that we all keep working towards these areas, and food is part of what we do. So short and sharp, that was what I wanted to say today.
Sure, Nikki, you happy to take questions?
Absolutely.
I have one. I mean, you mentioned in your submission, and plenty of others have too, the food hub concept. And I was just wondering if whether it was too early to tell or not how successful the new setup and arrangement as consented by council out at MacArthur's has been in that sense. Are you aware of how that is going?
I don't know how that has gone, but I do know of a little one up above Port Chalmers where MPI granted Alex and Meryl McNeil, who run Holy Cow Dairy, and they basically got a food hub up and running when this whole situation occurred. But we need better and clearer rules to allow them to be able to sell other produce, because for some producers it was too difficult to be able to sell their produce there straight away. And so I think some reactions were amazing, but I do think that food hub, just little ones around the city, is what we really need to put some effort into. I think the MacArthur's one will be fantastic to actually see how that has gone, but I can't answer that one right now, Aaron, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. Thank you. Councillor Walker.
Yeah, hi, Nikki. And some intriguing street art behind you there. Nikki, thanks for your work with our Food Network, and thanks obviously for a very good submission. My question is, you've listed quite a number of options for council in your written submission regarding food resilience. Can I ask you, if you had to choose maybe two that could be taken through to completion, what would you choose?
Thanks for that. I actually think the food hub concept, I really want to see local food hubs working with MPI as well as council to ensure that rules are relaxed, or not relaxed to make it unsafe, but relaxed in order to be able to safely sell food to people. I think that would be phenomenal. That's what I'd really like to see in the short term. And the other one is actually moving the good food Dunedin role. I think it has to come out of enterprise. I think it's just in the wrong place right there, and it really needs a focus from council to be able to say, we believe that food is important in council and we want to support local producers. And when I mean local, I'm meaning regional, you know, within Otago or within the South Island for some food, because there's some things we can't grow. But I'm not meaning supermarkets that are in food from overseas, which obviously couldn't happen completely all the time this time, but still was. So that's the key things we really want to focus on.
Cool, great answers. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Staines.
Hi, Nikki. Just wanted to tease out a little bit more your comments on the position being in the wrong place, and just wanting to make, for my benefit anyway, as Chair of Economic Development, is that because you're not getting the cooperation you need out of Enterprise Dunedin?
No, the Good Food Dunedin coordinator is absolutely fantastic, and has been placed within Enterprise Dunedin and still strives to do an awful lot. But part of our submission around that is we think a lot of the work is community-led. Such a lot is community-led, and we need that position to be free to support that community-led work, as well as focusing on the economic side for new businesses. But we feel like that position has been a little bit hamstrung because of the focus on that economic benefit for the city, when yes, of course, we've got to look at the economic benefit, but we've also got to look at how some of these things come out and move and shift. And a lot of it is to do with the community. And you know, as I mentioned, the Holy Cow milk, the dairy processing, that's actually a fantastic example of a community-based enterprise, you know, which nearly went downhill because of MPI and TB a few years ago. And the community got behind it and ensured that it didn't. And so I feel like we all feel like enterprise, as much as you do phenomenal work, it's just not the right place for that role.
I don't disagree, but I do wonder, like food hubs would be something that I would expect a lot of support out of Enterprise Dunedin, because that's economic.
Yeah.
I wonder whether, in fact, our coordinator, with it being only a part-time person, whether we're actually suffering from not enough resource to do the whole thing. And by being in Enterprise Dunedin, the priority may be being given to the things that have an economic benefit. So would you support having greater resource?
Absolutely, yes, greater resource. And to be perfectly honest, Chris, I would actually like to see food sat all through council. It needs to sit in waste, because there's such a lot of food, and the waste team are amazing, and they deal with food waste very well. They're really onto it. But food belongs in waste. It belongs in policy. The Good Food Charter needs to be throughout all of our policy. Everything that we're doing needs to think about food and the creation. It needs to be around land use and resourcing and what's happening there, who's buying what on some of our prime pristine lands. So it needs to be across there as well. So to be honest, Chris, I would have a food person across the whole of council in every single department. And that would really make sure that we're all speaking the right language when it comes to food resilience.
So Nikki, last question from me. When we wrote our strategies, they were written as individual strategies. And while there was an attempt to make sure that they aligned with each other, because they were built at different points in time, that's not necessarily perfect. So I guess, would you be a supporter of realigning the policies, making sure they are in line, and getting things like food, and there's others that would be reflected across all of our strategies?
Absolutely. You know, waste is another, personally not for our food network, but waste for me sits across every policy. When we're doing any sort of new build, we need to be thinking what's happening at the end of life. You know, we have to be thinking about some of these really key things right at the beginning across every single strategy that we have. So yes, I am in agreement that they do need to become more in line, because we have such a lot that cross over in so many ways.
Thank you for your feedback. It's great.
No problem. Thank you for hearing me today, everybody.
Finally, Councillor Houlihan.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wondered, I was quite concerned and mentioned it a few times actually during, you know, obviously through this crisis, and hopefully it's not still happening, but it might be, but about the amount of food waste there was for local producers that didn't, you know, with the crisis, they didn't have places to sell their food. And, you know, supermarkets seem to just be having their own, you know, suppliers, and didn't seem to be opening up to the local producers. That might have been happening, I don't know, but that was the perception. Have you got any updates on that, and were you concerned about that as well? And is there steps on seeing how, hopefully we don't have to do this again, but if in a scenario we could get more local producers into the supermarkets?
Absolutely, you've hit the nail on the head. It's absolutely the problem, you know.
Exactly.
The supermarkets are too big corporates for any small producer to get into there. The hurdles are phenomenal. They're just phenomenal. And I have done some research on this with my company, and it's just so difficult. So the idea of the hubs, the small hubs that are around that could the example I gave with Holy Cow, nobody was there. There was no person there because Meryl and Alex have it set up so that it's all online. You can just pay. It's a trust system. Agreed, it's not going to work everywhere, but there's a lot of small dairies that opened. They put up little screens and they still operated. And I just think we needed those in order to be able to take that food so we didn't have that waste, you know, and that was the big problem. We had a lot of food waste immediately, and that's what I would like to see change.
I absolutely agree. I think, is there any moves afoot to try to look to get more, I don't know whether it can be lobbied, but to get more local producers into supermarkets, because, you know, we're so heavily reliant at the moment on overseas food or the larger producers. And that, you know, as we've seen in this particular crisis that we are still in, that limited and caused problems with the food chain.
Yeah. Personally, I actually think it's up the chain. I think it's government that now needs to step in with our supermarkets. We have two supermarket owners basically, and they have not enabled local food to be in there in an easy way. It's not your responsibility as our local council to do that. I do believe it's got to go further up the chain, and there has got to be some policies in place for in situations like this. It has been ridiculous that food that we grow here has gone to waste, and yet we're getting the food that comes from China into our homes through a crisis. And so it has been completely disappointing, but that's not your role. It is further up the chain that has to change.
But it does, I agree, I don't think it is a council role. However, it does affect our city, and thank you so much for the work you're doing.
No problem at all.
Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Bold, for your submission and your energy and enthusiasm this afternoon. Appreciate it as always.
No problem. And well done, all of you, for remaining calm in this situation. I think you've all done a sterling job. So, and thank you for hearing me today.
Thank you. And almost perfectly timed, Otago Farmers Market are our next submitter. We have Kate Verco joining us. Welcome, Kate. You're on mute. Once you are off mute, the next 5 minutes are yours, should you require them.
Thank you, Mayor Aaron Hawkins. Kia ora koutou, everyone. I'm Kate Verco. I'm the General Manager of the Otago Farmers Market and have been for the past 7 years. Thank you for reading our submission and the appendix that goes with that. I haven't got a whole lot to add, but what I do want to say is that food is fundamental. It's basically a human right. And local food production ensures that in times of strife, we have resilience and security. So that's natural disasters or where distribution networks are affected. It's a very fundamental right. Local food is also very important for reducing the carbon footprint that we have, because it doesn't travel as far. And food, we're finding more and more people are wanting to know where their food has come from and to know that it's been grown in a way that supports the planet rather than harms the planet. We also think that children need to see how food is grown and have an understanding and importance of local food. The food resilience role has been a really great link to small producers and growers and food-based community groups from the council back into the community. And the role has been enormously important through this current crisis. Right from day one, really, we've had support from Ruth in the role to help our vendors try and get their product out to market when we don't have a physical marketplace. Also been really important with dealing with any food waste that we might have as a result of vendors not being able to get their product to market. So it's been an incredible link for us to have, and it's been great that the council has seen the importance of that that role for a number of years now, and that we have the Good Food Charter and the Alliance and an action plan. But we feel now that there's a need to build on this and to see where food resilience mandate can be built into policy level of the council, and where some increased resources can be put into the role and into our community to ensure that we do have food security going forward. So really that's what our submission is about. We support the role. We love the work that the council has done with the role currently, but we feel that the role can be supported further by being in a more influential structural, I like to call it, part of the council in terms of being embedded into policies, and that there's a bit more resource than I believe the current 8,000 per annum that goes into that role. So I don't have a whole lot more to say than that. I'm sure there's probably some questions. We know that our community values local food. We see that at the market every week with the, up to 8,500 people coming through in that 4-hour window to shop locally and support local producers. We also know we're an amazing incubator for small businesses that can give things a try before they have expensive startup costs, and test the market and get market feedback for their product. And we constantly see a stream of new smaller vendors coming through the market doing exactly that. I can't enforce enough the importance, and I think we all see that, the importance of local food in terms of supporting and valuing what we do here in this community, and holding us tight in times of strife, but even in times of not. Food security is very important, and as I said, it's a fundamental. So we really support the role that the council has already well established, and would just really like to see it strengthened, and with more resources, and probably into schools, supporting the Garden to Table and the Enviro schools teams to get more schools involved with understanding how food's grown, but in many ways, in all sorts of areas of the council, to see to include the concept of food resilience. And I believe parks and things are quite behind it, and there's a decreased use of Roundup, but it's all of those sort of understandings of the importance of us being able to feed our population anytime, but particularly when things aren't good.
I was bang on 5 minutes. Kate, well done. You happy to take questions?
Yes, thanks.
Councillor Benson Pope.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thanks very much, Kate, for all, if I may call you by your Christian name, for all your effort. I'm aware, as a not infrequent user of the wonderful asset, of the changes, in particular the advantage of the ceiling when it finally got done. I'm wondering if there are any other more expensive or significant issues like that around the site, location, size and stuff like that, that you'd like to make any comment about or comment on.
Certainly, as much as we love Dunedin's wild and woolly weather at times, it does have an impact on the amount of customers we get to the market on a wet day or a wet, southerly day. And certainly if the waterfront got developed at some point, I think there's some potential for the market to be in a space down there undercover. It would give us a whole lot of benefits in terms of our waste minimisation strategy as well. Having power and running water would help us enormously with both of those two things. So whilst we love our railway station site for many, many reasons, and it was great to get it sealed, it was like an airport runway, it has been, there are issues with the site in terms of just what we can continue to do. So we appreciate the offer. We have had, a rent freeze over the current situation. But yes, we, have had no money coming in for the last 6 weeks either. So we'll certainly think of that if there's anything more specific and anything more short term. What we're really stuck with since Cobb & Co has shut down is that we no longer have anywhere to sterilise the cups in our cup library, which has been a huge asset to the market. So we're left wondering how on earth we're going to manage to provide cups, not single-use cups, reusable cups for the public without the ability to sterilise it. But, whether the council can help with that kind of thing.
Okay, so in the wider sense, it's an issue for the future, but in terms of that particular issue, that must be something that City Property can actually find a solution for. So I'm writing.
I hope so. Yeah.
I'm writing it on my wee notepad for later, for sooner.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Councillor Reddick.
Okay, thank you for your submission. The overwhelming thing of reading through your submission is you would like to move council's involvement from enterprise into policy. So basically to take it up to a higher level. Have I got that right?
Yes.
And so as part of that, we have had some submitters talking about food policy and food resilience and sustainability and so forth. Do you have any specific strategies or initiatives in mind that would make a difference in our community? Because of course the farmers market is going very well, it's very popular, and I think all councillors go there at various times, including myself, and we have a range of other grocer shops and other facilities around the community. So what would be the kinds of strategies, initiatives that would manifest as a result of this change into policy?
Well, I think in many ways, and I'm not an expert on this, but I think having someone sitting around the table at the policy level that has a food resilience mandate, wearing that hat firmly, it will be surprising where food resilience can be built in. So, one example was the lessening use of Roundup. That's a very small thing, but it comes into urban planning and the use of urban spaces for growing food. As we see at Otago Polytechnic, having a living campus. So I think there's all sorts of ways that can happen. I personally think the most important way probably is education, however, and that's a resource issue to be able to get into schools and work with children on growing food.
Thank you.
Councillor Gary.
Thanks, Your Worship. Kia ora, Ms. Vercoe. I had a couple of questions. I think we're all really aware in the last number of weeks around the fragility of our food supply, if we hadn't been beforehand. Can I just check with you, following on from Dr. Bolt's submission and yours, that this is how you see the position, the food coordinator's position, it being alongside the likes of climate change and the way we look at that throughout our organisation and how we might address that throughout all of our activities. You see the food resilience role in the same way. Is that correct? Do I have that correct?
I think so. I think it can be more present and more built in at that higher level. It doesn't stop it from happening, though, drilling down into grassroots levels either.
Sure. And I was interested in the garden to table. How widespread is that in our schools? I'm aware that it was a fairly new initiative here. It's been around in other places for a long time, but how widespread is that?
I couldn't say for sure how widespread it is. It has been around for a few years. It's not something, we've dealt more with enviro schools here in Dunedin. So garden to table, I think, as you said, is relatively new here. I think, the concept is great, but as per most things, it lacks resources and teachers just don't have the time to extend their curriculum to incorporate it. So, yeah.
And my final question was, and apologies if I missed this, do you have any indication of, as we work through the levels, lockdown levels, when the farmers market might come back in some form or other? I know there's some online work going on, certainly, but it's a much missed in our community. And I think members of our community are going to be looking for these kinds of things around our social well-being as much as anything.
Exactly. Level 2. We had our last market on March the 21st. That was level 2. And so fingers crossed, March the 16th.
All the best. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Mandevers.
Thank you for your submission, Kate. Regarding the difficulty with sterilising food utensils, would it be helpful if the DCC was able to supply a wired electricity supply, say on the platform of the railway station, where you could simply plug in a sterilising unit? I understand that it's always been a problem with generators there and the noise and the ungreenness of them all. Would an electricity supply be something that we could do that you would really value?
Yes, and a water supply. You know, the two go hand in hand, really. I think we have a generator at the market, but it's the water supply and the power supply in the same place would be invaluable for us. Yes, it would be. It would really help with our waste minimisation policy.
Right. And I understand there's already water in the railway building and power there as well. Would you anticipate them simply being a service, or would you be happy, for instance, for the electricity supply to have a meter on it?
We'd be happy for it to have a meter on it.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Councillor Lord.
Yeah, thanks, Kate, for coming in and submitting. I fortunately live a bit far away and don't get into the market very often, but I just wonder, just on the topic of food resilience rather than the market, it seems to me that food's probably, I mean, I realise we got examples like $12 collies a few weeks ago, but generally food is cheaper and we get more now than we've ever got. And that's largely through individuals specialising. And I think of the land around the Torrey that used to be in market gardens and is now not because it became uneconomic. How do you propose to fix that problem? Or how would you suggest it could be fixed? I don't mean you personally.
I think what you're saying is that there's lots of food, and certainly corporate farming is able to provide a lot of food at perhaps reduced costs. But I think the people that we're dealing with are wanting to know that the food that they are eating, how it's grown, and that it has the planet in mind, and that it's not being grown here under somewhat environmentally unsound practices, being shipped back up to Christchurch and then being shipped back down, or not shipped literally, but driven back down to Dunedin. So I think the costs, you know, aren't just about the being able to buy, you know, a cauliflower for $3. There's a lot more costs inherent in that, and that local food does so much more than just feed tummies. You know, it supports the local economy as well. So I think that's. I don't know if I've answered your question there, but that's my thoughts.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I know what you mean. Yep.
Councillor Staines.
Okay. You're very much in line with some of our other submitters, which is good. Just questioning around the need for policy or for greater spread of the food and food resilience through our strategies. But if we're going to get out there and teach kids how to grow food and do those things, we need some feet on the ground. So I'm wondering where the balance is. If we have a limited amount of money to add to the coffers for food resilience, would you put it into feet on the ground getting things done, or would you put it into policy to get it stuck into our strategies?
Well, I think the position, the actual food resilience position, I still think is most useful at a higher level than where it currently sits. But the money, the resource that's allocated to it, apart from the actual salary, to be at the ground roots level. So I guess I've got, you know, a foot on both sides of the fence there.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Kate. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We are running ever so slightly behind, which means we may not have another break before we get to the end of the afternoon, but we'll see how we go. Mr. Weatherall. Welcome, Mr. Weatherall, and a familiar face on your right and our left. Mr. Bizet, welcome. The next 5 minutes are all yours once you've taken yourself off mute. Great to have you back at the annual plan, John.
How are we going now? Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
You're all good. You've got 5 minutes, gentlemen.
Good. Thank you very much. Yeah, Brett and I will Brett's going to do about 2.5 and I'll do the other 2.5.
All right. Very good.
Very good. Good afternoon, everyone. I am talking to you today as Brent Weatherall, Main Street, Dunedin jeweller. Beside me, I have prominent Dunedin identity John Bizet, ex-long-term city councillor and retail jeweller, who is also speaking to you today. We represent the Central Dunedin Business Group, comprising of over 40 owner-operated businesses in and around George Street, opposed to one-way traffic flow of the street. Our businesses and legal representatives believe that there has been a distinct breakdown of consultation from council between the proposed changes of George Street being advertised and getting the proposed changes rubber stamped by council 2 days later. Council is no place for fanatically obsessed views. George Street is all about doing business, convenient business. It is the view of our CDB group that all expensive trials undertaken by council to date, from light shows, octagon closures, parklets, or should I say park takers, have all been detrimental to our cash registers and customers. The majority of open-minded councillors must consider the wishes of the business stakeholders of Dunedin, whom the majority are clearly opposed to one-way traffic flow. Central business in Dunedin should be treated by the council as its ears. Yet there is a very strong undercurrent in this city at present of separatism and lack of consultation between our two parties. A petition to keep two-way traffic flow on George Street with ample parking has been initiated and is now closed. It is set down for presentation to the Planning and Environment Committee meeting on the 14th of May. The petition comprises of over 6,000 signatures. I'll repeat that, over 6,000 signatures, supporting the view of business which today's hearing should also take into consideration. I intend to present the common concerns of business and citizens alike as to why two-way traffic flow should be retained at the petition presentation. Overwhelmingly, I'm hearing business is not against Main Street upgrades. Upgrades that include improved accessibility, beautification, pavements and parking. But it is blatantly clear we do not want one-way traffic flow and reduced parking, which would have a catastrophic effect on business. It is great to read in Tuesday's ODT, city councillors speaking up, wanting to engage and work with central city businesses to help bring people back downtown. It's just a shame it's taken a pandemic to start such an initiative. I ask you today to please consider the concerns of businesses in and around George Street and refer today's submission to full council for a possible review of the traffic flow and parking needs of Dunedin's business community. Thank you, and I'll pass you over to John.
Thank you, Brent. And thank you for council for this opportunity. My concern is with the council process. I note that the council has already chosen a trio of companies to prepare the design work for redeveloping George Street, the O3 Collective. Part of their brief is to continue with the stakeholder consultation, which formally commenced in 2019, and are working through the preliminary design and in-ground investigations. Initially, I was heartened by the assurances given by DCC staff that their design was a preliminary design, but it seems now to be the design, with construction to begin early next year. This proposed construction includes the radical negative intention to turn George Street into a one-way north to south traffic flow. I am not against the proposal to upgrade George Street. There is a real need for a total revamp of George Street, and of course, the replacement of major underground infrastructure.
Got about 30 seconds, John.
Sorry, I will be another minute if you don't mind. I am totally opposed to the proposal to convert to a one-way traffic flow, which made it significantly harder to visit the area. The strength of George Street is accessibility, and one of the great things about living in Dunedin was highlighted in promotion of the city as one of the great small cities in the world, is that one can travel in a relatively short space of time from one side of the city to the other. To turn George Street into a one-way street would completely negate the ability to travel freely north, south, east and west through the city and arguably New Zealand's most iconic shopping precinct. It would be like putting a railway line down the middle of George Street, something that would have to be negotiated around. But back to the process. It's unfortunate that it's come to this. It would have been so easy for the council and retailers to work together. After all, we all want the same thing, the retention of the best shopping street in New Zealand. Why change it? Why not instead improve it for both smooth traffic flow and an enjoyable shopping experience? Another 30 seconds. If councils are looking for examples of successful centre city rejuvenation, look at the long-term plan of the New Plymouth District Council and the urban design prize-winning Central City upgrade, where the council reversed a decision made by the previous council and changed the Devon Street Mall into two-way traffic that allows for the smooth flow of traffic while offering a significantly increased shopping experience. Finally, my request to council is work with the retailers. Retailers are the city's largest employers and most have a significant personal investment in the area. My request to councillors is ask for an alternative plan showing two-way traffic flow. And given the problems you'll have to grapple with in the coming months, the wise thing to do would be to delay this proposal for at least 12 months, which will give everyone time for proper analysis of all aspects of this major city development. Thank you. I'm very happy to answer questions.
Thank you, gentlemen. No doubt about that. I can reassure you that no final decisions have been made about the detailed design of the George Street work. That process is still underway. But I have questions from Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Mayor Hawkins, and kia ora, gentlemen. I completely take on board what you're saying about consultation. I think we've seen what happened with the Octagon experience, and we definitely as councillors heard from retailers about that. I just want to ask, in the last couple of days, we've been talking about consultation about post-COVID recovery along the retailing, and there was an email sent out yesterday from Enterprise Dunedin to their database. I'm wondering if either of you received that?
No.
Okay, because we have asked that retailers be consulted with, because you are the people obviously that will have some great ideas. So I really encourage you, and I will make sure that you get an email that forwarded on so you can give us back your ideas to help revitalise things and get the city humming again.
The thing is that we've had plenty of ideas prior to this pandemic. And so I think we've got to take pandemic out of it, quite honestly, because it's come, it will eventually go. God willing, I think it will, and it'll be business as usual eventually. And we're talking about the future here, and I will talk about it when I present my petition more about protecting the asset of Dunedin's main street. I think it's got character and charm and spades, and I think if we protect it now in its present state, we are not going to be the same as every other centre. We are going to be traditional in Dunedin, and we're going to have charm and character in spades. And it's an asset which all the visitors coming to Dunedin speak to me all the time. They come to graduation parades with their children and everything else. They say it's exactly the same. The main street is basically when I was here 30 years ago, and it's fantastic. We've lost it where we come from. God, it's fantastic that the city forefathers have kept it. And now I'm worried as a retailer and a long-term Dunedin citizen, very proudly so, that it's going to be destroyed.
Thank you. I certainly hear that. I travel quite a bit and do a lot of meet a lot of agents and people who are interested in coming to see Dunedin, and that is what we hear from them, is that all of the other cities have lost their heritage in their centres. So for me, that's a really important thing, is to keep that sense of place in those heritage buildings and that heritage shopping centre. And I certainly look forward to hearing from you from some more ideas. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for your questions.
Thank you. Questions? Councillor Elder.
Thanks for your submission. And I've just got a couple of questions actually. When it comes to timing, how long do you think it will be before retailers feel like they can cope with another interruption, say a street upgrade? How long do you think that would take?
It's a very difficult question to answer. Certainly, there will be a long lead-in time before it gets back to anywhere near normality. You're probably looking months. So there will be a very disruptive period, the next probably 3 or 4 months. And I note, as I said in my presentation, that there is an expectation that this work will start early next year. You're running well behind time now to be able to do that, because if you're going to have consultation, which we've been assured of, that's going to take some time. So I can't be specific about that, but we're talking a long time, and probably 4 or 5 months, maybe longer.
I've actually spoken to my staff, and I'm approaching the going into level 2 as when we open our stores, is I am not going to hit the ground running. I'm going to hit the ground crawling. I'm going to adjust my opening hours. I'm going to stretch it out as much as I can. My staff are going to be working a wee bit less hours, but presently I work 6 days a week. We're going to go to 7 days a week, and yet I intend my staff to only work 5 days a week. I think the city is no different than my business or John's business. It is a business, money in, money out, and treading cautiously. And I want my business not to sink. I want it to survive. And I am not going to go like a bull at a gate and continue on with the way I was running my business prior to this pandemic. I'm going to tread very, very carefully, and I think the council should do so also.
The other question was, did you feel like in the consultation process, which was out there for a while, to do with the George Street upgrade, did you feel like you had every opportunity to input?
Well, from my point of view, not every opportunity. As Brent alluded to, and I touched on myself, consultation is important. Now, Dunedin is a relatively small city, and when you've got a major upgrade like you're advocating now, it would be very easy for council staff to identify the main players, whoever they may be, and you may only be talking about 4 or 5 people. You invite them in. You don't send them a letter saying this is what we're going to do, or you don't leave it until such time as you have a council meeting and the council decides they're going to go ahead with a radical change without actually speaking to the main players beforehand. And the main players in this particular saga are the retailers. It would have been very easy for the council to sort out maybe 5 or 6 or 7 leading retailers, and I'm not suggesting I am, but there are leading retailers that could have been taken on board and made aware of the dramatic suggestion to one-way George Street before it actually went public. We could have had this debate in private before it got into the public, and that would have been so much better. Both sides would have had an opportunity to speak for and against it. And who knows, the council staff may have been able to get on side with some of the retailers and persuade them that what they're doing is the right thing. But that opportunity was not presented.
And this upgrade plan, they call it an upgrade plan. To me, an upgrade is a lick and a promise, a coat of paint, pavements, new signage, trees, whatever, seats, whatever. This is a redesign. It's not an upgrade. It's a total. It's turned George Street on its head. Historical George Street on its head, and I'm not happy about it.
So, in the future, what kind of engagement do
I think you cut out there slightly, but I think I got the gist of what you're asking. And quite frankly,
stakeholders and people who have got development process do you want?
2 days from being advertised in the ODT to being basically rubber stamped by council, quite honestly, is not good enough. It's not long enough to consult with us all to see what our thoughts are. And it's put us to a lot of stress and trouble to get to this stage to say that we're not happy to you. And I'm pleased you're hearing us today.
Councillor Benson-Pope. You're on mute, Councillor.
Thank you, gentlemen, for your presentation. For the absolute avoidance of any doubt, you're quite happy about the budgeted amount for high quality street treatment throughout your patch, which will be $28 million. Is that correct?
Yeah, I am. And as I've said in my presentation, I have no difficulty with the proposed upgrade at all. It's important that the George Street is upgraded, and it's important that you replace the infrastructure in the main street. No worries with that whatsoever. And if that's if that is the cost, then that is the cost.
Okay, thank you. That's good. I'll just make one qualification that when you talk about Dunedin having always been the way it was, well, it's the way it is now because of the work that was done 30 years ago, as Councillor was too well.
We were both around in those days.
Can I correct? Yes, indeed. The Weatherall family was very involved, but I won't go there today. Can I correct the issue about the timing? At the current position, no work is planned before April of next year. So there is plenty of time to get things right and get agreement. So the issue for you, am I right, is the traffic flow and the design and having some comfort that what the traffic engineers and the urban designers and the experts, I may say, have come with and are confident with is going to work. You want to have some comfort about that. Is that fair?
Do you consider the retailers of Dunedin as experts? Because we are stakeholders and we have a vested interest and pay a lot of money.
I certainly consider that you're serious and major stakeholders, but you're not the only ones. But I doubt that you have, I doubt that you have expertise in traffic management or urban design. You may have, and that's good. And that should be factored into the process, and that needs to be part of all of this.
Well, that comes back to what I was saying before, David. Had we been given the opportunity prior to this hearing, we could have brought along our own urban designers. We could have brought along our own experts to say that what you're advocating is wrong. And coincidentally, going back to your April of next year, that's early next year. And that's when the action is going to start. And that's hardly good enough.
Well, let's make sure that we all get together and come to an agreed position.
And I have over 6,000 signatures that don't agree with your experts.
Well, no point in commenting on that at the moment.
Councillor Venables.
Councillor Bezet, you very optimistically said that we all want the same thing, the best for George Street. It's a nice idea, but in my experience, there are a number of Dunedin City Council representatives and staff who want their ideology of a car-free central city above what is best for George Street. What would your comment be regarding the ideology of having a car-free central city?
Well, clearly, I would be absolutely opposed to it, and it is ideology. That's all it is. And I presume you're talking when you're mentioning some councillors, the present Mayor, Mayor Hawkins, who is a member of the Green Party, And the Green Party policy is think globally, act regionally, and that's what Councillor Hawkins, Mayor Hawkins is doing. That's fine. He's a representative of the Green Party, and that's their policy. But I would be opposed to that. I'm not
Speaking
opposed
to your submission, Mr. Bezet, that might be more constructive use of time.
Sorry?
If you want to confine your comments to your views rather than trying to interpret mine, that might be a more constructive use of time.
I was answering a question. It was quite a provocative question, and I've given a provocative answer.
Thank you, Mr. Bezet. My other question is that you have just said before regarding the 28 million for the George Street section of the project, you've said that if that is the cost, then that is the cost. Are you aware that the 28 million is the gold-plated version of the cost? And in fact, a cost of half of that was available, and a much lesser cost again was also available prior to the election in terms of how we would do up George Street. Well, are you aware that there were 3 different costs, and that what we've got at 28 million is the absolutely gold-plated, I don't know how many $1,000 per square metre cost?
Yeah, well, no, I wasn't aware of that, and once again, that just shows a lack of consultation. However, if whatever the cost is, and I'm referring now to the upgrade of the infrastructure and the necessary work that has to be done in George Street, that is what we have to do. Of course, that must be maintained. But why take a radical stance and try to convert, or have an intent to convert George Street into one-way traffic? Why? That hasn't been explained at all.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time. We're out of time, unfortunately, but I doubt this is the last time we'll have the opportunity to have this conversation. So thank you for your submission. It's 5 to 3. We're running 25 minutes behind time, and at this point, we're not scheduled to finish until 5, even if we catch up. And I'm aware that staff have other commitments after that point. So something to bear in mind as we progress. Our next presenter is, that was a comment for my colleagues, not for submitters. My apologies. I didn't mean to, didn't realise you were still here, to be honest. Our next submitter is Eleanor Doig from the South Dunedin Community Network. Welcome, Ms. Doig. You're on mute. And as soon as that is resolved, the next 5 minutes are yours. Welcome, Eleanor. You're on mute. If you take yourself off mute, we're all yours for the next 5 minutes, should you need.
Very interesting format. There are 4 points that I would like to emphasise from our written submission, but I'd like us to start with a statement from Grace Gemmell, who is a young resident in South Dunedin. Over to you, Grace.
Hello, councillors. My name is Grace Gemmell, and I'm 11 years old. I've only ever lived in South Dunedin, so you could classify me as an kid expert about all things South Dunedin. There are a few things that you could do to make South Dunedin a much better place for children and young people. Today I'm going to talk about 3 of them. Firstly, playgrounds. Playgrounds are important to kids. Take the playground on Hillside Road, the one with lots of grass and 4 swings. To me, it's a miserable looking playground. There's not enough equipment, and it's not an attractive place for kids to be. And lots of children and kids live close by that playground, so it should be made much better. And what it needs is more equipment, more colour, and more to do. The playground needs some love, and you can provide it. Kids want more than just 4 swings. They want exciting equipment like forts and flying foxes, merry-go-rounds, and twirly slides. Secondly, the South Dunedin Library. The planned South Dunedin Library and Community Hub also needs to be made with us kids in mind. We need a quiet place to learn and a safe place to hang out. Anything that will promote local talent would be really good. Being a musician, I like the idea of a soundproof music studio that would allow young people to record their stuff. I want you to design this place for people who you really want to use it. And finally, South Dunedin. South Dunedin looks old and not in a good way. What it needs is colour. Kids love colour, and colour makes everything look far more attractive and interesting. Another thing that would make South Dunedin stand out is a dedicated toy shop. We don't have one. There's the warehouse, but I'm talking about a specialist shop that would promote local toy makers and set South Dunedin apart from anywhere else. Thanks for listening to me. When you're making these decisions, please remember what it was like to be 11. Think about kids. That way the choices you make will be good ones. Thank you.
Kia ora, Grace, appreciate that. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you. Isn't she lovely? So firstly, the network, South Dunedin Community Network, strongly urges the council to grow the place-based community development fund, which is a major funder of our work. One thing the present COVID-19 crisis has shown is the power of community. Community spirit is high at the moment and needs to be nurtured and maintained as we move out of the current restrictions and into longer term economic issues. Place-based community development initiatives hold a primary role in that work. For the network, this means coordinating, communicating and facilitating across South Dunedin with the goal of assisting the development of connection and a sense of being a coherent community made up of many diverse communities. Building a strong sense of togetherness and positive engagement with their neighbourhoods and the wider community leads in turn to higher participation and a stronger sense of belonging. We strongly urge the council to expand the amount of money in the Place-Based Community Development Fund and to extend the length of the time which each funding round covers. This supports the goal of the DCC social wellbeing strategy. Dunedin people feel included in their local communities and the wider city. Housing, with a serious and growing housing shortage in Dunedin and already high rental costs, the provision of good quality, warm, dry, sustainable housing is of fundamental importance. In South Dunedin, with the potential future need for replacement housing due to the effects of high water levels and climate change, there is an especially high need for clear-sighted forward planning for the provision of good social housing. The network urges the council to work energetically with central government to start this building program now, so that when climate change effects are being fully experienced, our community is prepared and safe. This supports the goal in the wellbeing strategy. Dunedin people live in warm and healthy homes, and affordable housing options are available to all. The library and community complex. Grace has spoken to this, but I want to add my voice. The development of this community resource will be of huge benefit to South Dunedin, a community which has until recently been largely ignored in terms of social investment, and where the need is really urgent and going to get more so. We applaud the decision to go ahead with this project and strongly encourage the maintenance of this as a priority for funding and action in the time ahead. As part of the co-design panel, I'm really excited to see the project brief continuing to develop. The network will enthusiastically engage with the community to build excitement and planning with this excitement project. This supports the goal.
Got 30 seconds, Eleanor.
Sorry?
Got 30 seconds.
30 seconds. Okay. So the last point was about the infrastructure, which is largely in your plan anyway, about the creating work in the time ahead with water, stormwater, all of those infrastructure things which we really need and are going to need badly out here. Is that okay, Aaron? Am I done?
Perfect, thank you. You happy to take questions? Yep. Either of you or both of you?
Where's Grace? Yes, I'm sure. Are you, Grace? You okay with questions?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can't promise there will be. I just thought I'd ask in advance. Councillor Houlihan.
Thank you, Your Worship. However, my hand was up to speak to Brent Witherall. However, I'm very interested in what you're saying about South Dunedin, and I think you've raised some really good points. When they get that library, it'll be fantastic. And Grace, thank you so much for speaking. So nice to see young children speak in this forum, because it's not always, sometimes can be a little bit scary. And I agree, I think it'd be nice to have more colour in South Dunedin, and a toy shop maybe. Have you thought about putting out some ideas to some of the businesses to see if they'll stock some more toys and things? That might be an idea or something like that, but lovely to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor O'Malley.
Thank you, Worship. Good to see you again, Eleanor. Hello,
And you,
Grace.
Jim.
I just want to compliment you, Grace, on the quality of your presentation. It was excellent, and I hope you get involved in the co-design of the community hub. I'm actually going to your written submission, Eleanor, and the request that we do a 0% rates rise. Because I've noted to other people, it puts us in a hard place when at the same time you're requesting that we increase our operational expenditure by increasing the place-based fund.
Yeah.
And I think, to your verbal submission, I support everything you're saying, is that South Dunedin's been waiting a long time for the community hub. I believe the play safe groups have done very well, and I'd go so far as to extend more or less along Grace's idea that we should be putting more emphasis back on King Edward Street and bringing it up in the same way we're bringing up George Street and
Yes.
Princess Street.
Yes.
So
Thank you, Jim.
if we're going to not to do a rates increase, then do you agree that means we're going to have to take on more debt?
Yes, it probably does. With the zero increase, I'm really thinking about our population here. I mean, there are people, and I'm in this category myself, where the rates increase is not a problem. But for some, so I should really have talked about rates rebates, or consideration given to people who just are not going to be able to pay rates. But personally, I think we get very good value for our rates, and I have no objection to paying more.
So maybe, are you saying perhaps what we need to be considering is those who have been affected by COVID-19 need to try to identify them and see what we can do for those people, rather than necessarily across the board?
Yes.
Great.
Yes, thank you, Jim.
My last comment is back to Grace. Perhaps Eleanor might make sure that you're connected properly to the playgrounds upgrade work that we're doing right now, to make sure you got the right input to it.
Definitely. Yeah. The playgrounds issue has been one that's come up in all of our community conversations. It's been the most common theme coming through. So we've already been speaking to DCC people about what we need to do. There is no expectation that the council will do it all. And I think from my point of view as a community development person, I think there is huge benefit for the community to get behind this and do it largely itself, but with support obviously from the council. And Grace will be right in the thick of that, won't you, Grace?
Councillor Gary, a question.
Thank you, Worship. Kia ora, both of you. Grace, I've got a question for you. Thank you for submitting. I wanted to know, how's this experience felt like? We don't have a lot of young people who submit to the annual plan, and certainly not turning up to hearings, and this is a unique situation. How has that experience been for you so far?
Pretty good. I was a bit nervous because quite a lot of people to talk in front of, but I like it. I like talking in front of people.
Excellent. And I was really interested in your 3 ideas. If you had to choose one as being the top idea, which one would it be?
Well, I do really think that kids should have good playgrounds to go on, because not like some people can't afford lots of toys and stuff for their children.
So the playgrounds would be your top one of your 3. That's really good to know. And Ms. Doig, I no doubt you've been really busy of late with your community work. We've been asking this of other people. It's been a really good chance to ask this question about what are the immediate needs of the community you're working with in South Dunedin. What do you hear? Well, we've heard through the lockdown level 4, it was about access to food. We're hearing that with older people, it's reassurance about going out and about. What would be your comments about that?
all of those are true, and probably the isolation of our older people is definitely an ongoing issue. But actually, I think the biggest issue around here is poverty and just not having enough money to make ends meet. And until that is met in whatever way it's possible, I think there will be ongoing issues here. I think we need to put more money into people's pockets, because people who don't have money spend it, you know, because you've got to feed the kids. Whereas people who've got more money, they do what they're going to like with it, but not necessarily spend it.
Thank you. Really appreciate that.
Thank you.
Is that your pen, Eleanor, that I can hear?
Oh, it probably is, Aaron. Sorry.
Just making sure that, just making sure. Councillor Raddick.
Thank you. So Eleanor, I'm curious, you know, get some more money in this afternoon. What about the idea of, with the library and community hub, putting in practice rooms and teaching facilities for performing arts and all manner of, you know, music and arts and so forth, and then a small theatre for presentation of performing arts, and people would come from all over Dunedin to present, but also to view the performances there. And correspondingly, do you think that would help the revival of the South Dunedin business district and create more jobs there?
Absolutely. I think so completely. It's a fascinating project. One of the key ideas that the architect talked about in the co-design right at the beginning was the idea of 2 nodes along King Edward Street, with the community centre at one end and Cargill's Corner at the other. And his wishes and our wishes that the movement between those 2 spaces will actually activate and bring life to the main street. Yeah. One of the other things that we are very aware of in the network at the moment is that the business community in South Dunedin has not been involved in any of the work that we're doing. And we're keen to have a hui with the business community and the wider community to find ways in which the wider community can support our local businesses and vice versa, and bring those 2, because at the moment there's not much, as far as I'm aware, there's not much conversation between those 2 sectors, and finding ways in which we can like encourage micro enterprise or little startup businesses or whatever. And that's another thing in the community centre. One of the suggestions is that we have a business centre in the library, which will
provide business training perhaps.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wonderful.
Because there are a lot of people down here who have not had good experiences of school, but who are far from stupid, and giving people the opportunity to be mentored into making their own business would be awesome.
Thanks, Eleanor.
Thank you, Eleanor, and thank you, Grace. Thank you for your submission and for coming to speak to us today. Really appreciate it.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much.
Next, we have Suzanne Menzies-Culling. Kia ora, Suzanne. You're on mute. Yes. And thank you for your patience. Apologies for our running over time, but the next 5 minutes are yours should you wish to use them. We can't hear you, Suzanne. You're not on mute. Which makes me think it's a microphone issue.
Your worship, she'll need to turn her microphone on her actual computer, and that will help. And speaker.
Okay, I'm assuming you heard that instruction, Suzanne, about your microphone and speaker.
now?
Yes.
Oh, okay, it's better. I took my speaker out, my external speakers out. When I first made this submission, I was focusing on the waste plan, and I support that. I support the initiative of doing the green waste and getting rid of black bags and bins for rubbish, etc., etc. And also I mentioned about trying to tighten up the contracts for private rubbish collectors so that they actually have to sort. I know that there is a business in Auckland that is doing that. I'm not sure of the name, but it was something on TV this week. The other thing that I wanted to just raise was that electronic recycling. There was a time a few years ago when the DCC sponsored a collection for electronic rubbish over a weekend. And I think that's going to be increasingly a problem, trying to repurpose and stop that going to landfill. So I would encourage the council to have a look at that as well. The second part of my submission was actually about the future planning and resilience building that I really appreciated had been put into the annual plan. But since COVID-19 has hit us all, I had some other thoughts about that. And one of the things, apart from the things like local procurement and stuff like that, was actually asking the council to get their staff to explore setting up local currency. Because the economic system that we have at the moment allows our wealth to bleed out of a system that could be a circular economic system. I know Leah McBay, who's a former city councillor, did a lot of work on this. I have a copy of her annual plan for Dunedin, which was called an economic antidepressant. I'm sure it's also available at the public library and at the Hocken. But if it's not available from there, I'm happy to scan the pages of this work in so that people can, the staff can actually have a look at it. But I think given that we're looking at resilience, future proofing in terms of not only future pandemics, but also climate change, given that our people are our most important asset, that the last month has actually shown us that. I think that it would be really important to have the council look at how it can participate in creating this resilient economic system to run parallel with the New Zealand dollar. I'm not suggesting we replace it. I know it has happened in overseas in lots of places. There are examples that Leah mentioned, and that was her book was published in 1998, so there's 20 years of development that's happened since then. But yeah, I think that it's really important in terms of moving away from our thinking about austerity. I just can't emphasize enough that this austerity does not work. It punishes the poor disproportionately. It led us, the whole world, into the Great Depression of the 20s and 30s. There's plenty of work to be done. The money is going to possibly be short and a lot of people will be out of work. So we have to find a way as a city that we can actually mobilize and maximize the contribution of our citizens and keep the wealth circulating within our community rather than draining off either to other metropolitan areas or overseas. So I think that's pretty much, yeah. The other thing too is that austerity was practiced in parts of the world after the GFC, and they're now the countries that are sort of basket cases. So rather than slash and burn and think that tightening our purse strings will actually solve the problems of the world, I think we should be really courageous and imaginative and look at what all the tools are that we can actually use as a city to keep us moving forward and helping our citizens to prosper.
Thank you, Suzanne. You're happy to take questions?
Yeah.
One from me just on local currencies. And from my understanding of them, where they have been successful, they've been community-led rather than state-led.
Yeah.
So I guess my question would be, does the community support exist to make that happen and to drive that rather than the proposal disappearing into the more of government?
I don't think that's really been scoped lately, but I think there's a conversation that needs to be had. And I know one of the things that Leah talked about quite passionately was that local body has to be involved. It has to have some large employers who are prepared to pay their staff in a mix of the national currency and local currencies. And so that's why I'm suggesting it to the City Council. I think that if some work can be done to explore how this can happen, and the conversation can be had, like we can start it in the community, that's not a problem. But it's just knowing that there are large employers, for example, and also large consuming bodies who are prepared to be part of this would actually give it legs.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Worship. Kia ora, Suzanne. I was very interested in listening about the e-waste, and I do agree that's a problem. But what I wanted to ask about was the local currency. I've been asking online what ideas people have for helping revitalise the businesses here. And yesterday we had some students come in who were talking about how we could get them out spending as well. And I also did a post about that. And people did bring up around having a local currency. So I would, my question to you is, please send me the papers. I'd be very interested in reading them.
Sure, sure.
Thank you.
Councillor Walker.
Yeah, hi, Suzanne. I'm definitely not experienced enough to begin the conversation around an Otapoti Bitcoin at this juncture, but maybe in the future. But I do want to ask you about a question about one of my bugbears, which is the production of waste at source. And the question would be, do you think that the government and by extension, I guess, councils should be lobbying at a much higher political level to impose barriers to businesses who create so much waste at source and are not obliged to do anything about it?
Absolutely. You know, it's the old situation of polluter pays. And I think that it's really important that we actually bring all the levers we can to bear on people who create a lot of waste, to actually reduce it, minimise it, or pay the price for that. Because most of the waste that we have, I understand, is commercial waste. And so something really has to be done. There has to be a disincentive for the business community or the contractors or whoever to stop actually just dumping it wherever, because that's our big problem.
Cool, great answer. And a second question, can you please also look me into the information that Councillor Barker just requested, please?
Sure, yes, absolutely.
Councillor O'Malley.
Worship, Kia ora, Suzanne. I want to touch on your waste sorting observation. I'm a great believer in the same thing, and I think you probably are talking about Green Gorilla in Auckland, who does sorting of construction demolition waste primarily. One of the things I think a lot of people are not aware of, and I guess I'm going to ask you, are you aware of, that we as a city only control our own waste facility, and we don't actually set the rules around waste disposal, but they're set by the regional council. And so we run into a problem where we could set up a fantastic facility, but we don't monopolize the rules around whether you have to use it or not. So I would encourage you actually to go to the ORC when you're submitting there.
Right, okay. So you don't let out any contracts, it's all done by the ORC?
No, we can stipulate in some of our contracts what we want to be done, but a lot of the contractors, we're only one of the people that that use contractors, and our landfill is our landfill. Yes. And there's nothing legally obliging that contractor, if they're operating in Dunedin, to use our landfill. We could make them do it in our contract, but that's the only one, and we effectively do when it comes to the black bags. They come to our landfill. Right. So our control is somewhat limited, and both the ORC and the DCC need to work hand in hand. And I would basically gently nudge my colleagues at the ORC to say, it would be quite nice to see your hand, so we could work hand in hand. And I would then suggest that you might want to actually nudge them along and say the DCC is probably quite willing to go in this direction, but they need assistance.
Okay, thank you for that.
Great, thanks, Suzanne.
Thank you. And as fruitful as some of these discussions may be, I would ask people to focus on asking questions of submitters and submissions at this point, lest we go over time. But we seem to have exhausted questions and statements, Suzanne. So thank you.
Thank you
for your submission. Appreciate that.
Thank you very much. Have a good afternoon.
Yeah, you too. We have Peter Gale next. Welcome, Peter.
How are you?
Very good, thank you. The next 5 minutes are all yours.
Okay. I probably won't need 5 minutes because I'm pretty much just speaking to the submission anyway.
That's fine. You don't have to take the 5 minutes. That's the most you're allowed.
Okay. Hey, look, you've obviously all read my submission, and you know, things have changed a lot since I think the council allocated the approximate 600 grand for reducing the bus fares, and you know what I'm alluding to is COVID-19 and the way the local business economy will have been decimated, primarily tourism, which is an industry that's near and dear to my heart. But probably first and foremost, I think now is the time to look at allocating funds towards value add activities or allocations, as opposed to what I would call an expense, which the subsidy seems to be. So that's just a side comment. If I look more centrally at the actual proposal, I sort of commend the council on trying to incentivise the use of public transport, but and I think instinctively, you know, it's very easy for people to kind of look at the price issue. Now, that may well be one reason why certain segments of the market don't use public transport, but I suspect there's a hell of a lot of other reasons. And what I'm advocating is that before ratepayers' funds are allocated, it's actually worth investing a few dollars and understanding more about why people don't use public transport. And in terms of people, I'm looking at, you know, various segments of the market, anyone from someone who's a vulnerable person, maybe elderly, through to your young mobile people, your professionals, all those various groups, understanding what are the reasons they don't use public transport, what they like, what they don't like about the bus system, and what we can do to, by we I mean the council and the city, can do to actually encourage the use of those buses. Now, once you know you've actually invested the funds in that research, then you're going to be in a hell of a lot more powerful position to allocate funds in the areas that are going to give the greatest benefit. So that's pretty much it. I mean, I'm just approaching it purely from what I would do as a business person. If I'm looking at investing money in my business and certain initiatives, I want to first of all find out where the funds are going to be best applied and what's most likely to generate the best result. At the moment, it strikes me pretty much as a bit of a guess. And you might well find that, sure, you know, if I conducted a survey today and had one question it and said, if I reduce the price of my goods and services, will you use more of them? Well, I think most people would generally answer yes. But there should be other factors that we're looking at, because, you know, if you keep reducing prices, it's going to cost the ratepayers a lot more and may not actually incentivise or encourage other people in or other segments of the ratepayers to utilise the buses. So you're really only going to be attracting the price sensitive segment of the market, and who knows how big that segment is. It might only account for 10% of ratepayers. Who knows? Does that make sense?
That's not for us to judge. Are you happy to take questions, Mr. Gale?
Yeah, absolutely.
Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Mayor Hawkins. Kia ora, Pete. I just have one question about the research. What factors other than price do you think influence people to use buses?
Look, I mean, I could probably guess at a few, and that's why you'd undertake qualitative research for a start, is to find out, you know, you and I can guess at probably half a dozen, but there might be 20 reasons. That's why you conduct your qualitative research and then you measure that. I mean, I could think of something like, I don't even know if a bus has Wi-Fi. So if I'm commuting from Waverley to the centre of Dunedin, one of the benefits that I'd see in travelling in a bus is that maybe I can connect, do some work while I'm travelling. The buses have Wi-Fi. I don't know. You know, maybe the timing's not right. I don't know. Just I'm sure there are a whole raft of other factors that are reasons why people don't travel. I mean, in fact, I'd probably suggest that there would be a large percentage of people that even if the prices were free, if you could jump on a bus for free, they probably still wouldn't use them. Now, that's why we need to undertake the research, is to understand why.
Thank you.
What
As
are the
someone
reasons?
yeah, oh yeah, well, I sometimes think that people might have a perception about the sort of people that use buses, because I'm a bus user and I loved working on the bus and using my my data to do it. So I think you're quite right about Wi-Fi. Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you. All of the academic research, Peter, says that the three biggest drivers are legibility, i.e. clarity of routes, frequency of service, and price. Those are the three big ones. So I guess my question is, if you accept that body of work, do you think it would be more helpful to if you are going to conduct research, to find out how the local population segments across those three things? So
yeah.
for how many people would rely on frequency, how many are price sensitive, how many need, and legibility is really more about convenience, so more direct routes or whatever.
Sure. So that academic research, was that locally done, or?
Oh, it's internet. It's the international experience around transport planning. Yeah.
So it's generic. Yeah. So I mean, and look, and that may be applicable to New York. It might be applicable to London. But what I'm advocating is that, you know, in Dunedin it's unique. I mean, I don't think you could apply any research that's intended for the London market, for example, where they have a tube system, or for the Japanese market where you have an amazing public transport system, or even Sydney, for example. I just don't think that probably what they've done is distilled 50 factors into clusters that have distilled down into maybe 3 factors. Now, to suggest that they are equally applicable to all those different areas as they are to Dunedin, I think is probably jumping the gun. I think, you know, if you're going to even contemplate spending that amount of money, it's well worth investing a fraction of that on tailoring some research for the Dunedin environment, which is unique. We're talking primarily buses, we're not talking tubes, we're not talking ferries. And you might well find that the factors are completely different, or different weightings applied. You know, I would imagine there's probably a dozen factors. Now, price might be one of them. I mean, it wouldn't apply to me, for example, and I know lots of friends that, you know, even if you told me to go on it for free, I probably wouldn't travel on it because it doesn't suit me. Now, it might suit me if it had Wi-Fi, or it might suit a different group, but those are the conversations we need to have. And as a researcher, I wouldn't even want to guess at what the various reasons are for various groups of society. You know, that's why we do the research, and I think you know, we owe it to ratepayers to do something that is more tailored to the Dunedin environment. And today, particularly, and I mean, those reasons may have changed now after COVID-19. Who knows? There may be different drivers now. People are probably, they may even be more price sensitive.
Yeah, I was thinking more Tauranga than New York, but I take your point. About,
absolutely. Yeah, you get what I'm saying.
Yeah. Councillor O'Malley.
Thanks, Bishop. Thanks, Peter. Well, would you take the example of, say, a South Island town, maybe an Otago-based town, that had done something like that and had a positive impact on ridership? Would that be the kind of evidence you'd be looking for?
No, I wouldn't even say that the research is transferable from town to town. No,
even though Queenstown has almost tripled its ridership since it brought in a $2 flat fare, you wouldn't consider that evidence worthy of what is effectively a trial?
No, because Queenstown is a considerably more congested and bottlenecked transport network than Dunedin, with a completely different demographic.
So even the evidence of a town in Otago is not enough. And what about the idea that if you go out to the public and you ask them what they want in public transport, in the form of the regional public transport plan public hearings that we do,
yeah,
would that data not be enough as well, when the feedback is that one of the barriers to use is price?
Probably not, because that research is very generic, and it's not well targeted.
Yeah, it's
So
only
I mean,
of Dunedin what they want. So I guess
I would call it waffle research.
How would we do it if our own public consultation is not good enough and the positive activity of a town in Otago is not enough evidence? What would we do research-wise that would be considered robust enough if those are not considered robust data to do what is only a trial?
Well, as I said in the submission, you'd look at a stratified survey. So what you're doing is actually getting representative samples right across the board. Targeted questions. Now that you alluded to the consultation. Now, I can't actually recall what the questions were in the consultation, but I'm guessing that they're probably fairly generic questions, and the consultation would have been in the context of a whole lot of other things. So that tends to cloud the issue. So, you know, if you're going to do research, you'd actually have to look at, well, what's the goal of the research? And the goal of the research is to understand exactly what the drivers are of the uptake of public transport across the various segments in the city, how they prioritise those segments. So, I mean, I'd want to know, you know, is price number one on the priority list? Well, if it's number one, for what segment? And what percentage of the city does that segment represent? Now, it might appeal to vulnerable people in you know, low socioeconomic segments, but those people may already be travelling on, you know, I know some of them have, you know, free passes because, you know, they come at certain times of the day and all that sort of stuff. So there's a whole lot of cross-sectional data that needs to be collected. Now, it doesn't, I'm not talking big cost. I mean, heck, something like that you could probably do for a fairly comprehensive study, you'd do for less than 50 grand. Now, in the context of contemplating 600 grand, that's not much. And that's going to be an investment in actually understanding the public transport landscape to the future. So it's not a one-off, whereas the 600K to me is just like, okay, well, let's just chuck 600K on the basis of some fairly generic research that to me is, yeah, look, if it was my business, I would want something more targeted. And I think,
okay,
you know,
I won't belabor this any longer, only to say that, do you understand that in the debate of the 600,000, it's not a $600,000 payment, it's a $600,000 guarantee that if we don't get the ridership, that's the gap we would fill. But the fare box recovery scheme indicates that if we get an increase in ridership, we won't have to pay the 600,000. Are you aware of that?
Wasn't aware of that. No, that's not the way it's being presented.
Okay, well.
But having said that, still, I think, you know, that probably still the underlying direction of the whole initiative is around price. Now, you know, and probably the other thing that clouds the issue too is how this relates to the regional council, because obviously the DCC is kind of stepping out on a limb, and it's, you know, the water's a little bit muddy with the regional council's role in this. Now, arguably, they're the ones that should be conducting the research, not the DCC. So you can probably park that for a minute and let's assume that it's the DCC driving it. Because I do personally think the ORC, or maybe in collaboration with the DCC, but maybe if you went back to the ORC and said, look, you know, can we fund a joint study before we actually progress anything to really understand the nitty gritty of our public transport going forward, maybe even a 5-year plan, understanding why the senior executive who lives on a lifestyle block and you know, out you know, near Tyree Mouth, not Tyree Mouth, sorry, up in Waikari or whatever, versus the little old lady in South Dunedin. What are the various reasons they use public transport, they don't use it, all those sorts of things. How much extra would I be prepared to pay, for example, if the bus had a, you know, I stepped on the bus and there was a free coffee for me. Now that's a left field idea, but you know, all those sort of things might come out of it. You know, first thing you want to do when you're traveling to work is, you know, grab a coffee. Do you provide that service on a bus? I don't know. But what I'm trying to do is say they're the sort of things you'll get on you will get on out of some well-targeted research. And you know what you're trying to do is actually develop a transport system that's future-proof.
Thanks, Peter. We're losing your connection. Not particularly strong for some reason.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Not your fault. Welcome to Gigatown. And now,
yeah, I'm losing you too, Aaron.
I can reassure you though that no one gets free passes on the bus, not even poor people, sadly. More's the pity. But thank you for your submission and thank you for your feedback. I appreciate that. Next we have Ms. Bunce, I believe. Welcome, Jenny.
Hello. I can see you, I can hear you, but I can't.
I can see you and hear you.
Ah, yeah. That's fine.
The marvels of modern technology. Sorry about that. The next 5 minutes are all yours, should you require them.
I like that, Ryder. My sympathies to you. It must be very difficult trying to do a budget in what is the most extraordinary circumstances, and it's changing all the time too, I know that. So that the things that I wrote a long time ago are just completely irrelevant, and I'm sure that's the same for you people too. All I wanted to do, and I hope I won't take it long at all, is to go through points. I presume everyone's got both the submission and the single page. Is that right?
It's been circulated in advance, yeah.
Right, you're right. That's great. So I don't need to go through it because you've all got it. I just want to really say that, first of all, this is a time, I think, where there are obvious negatives, huge ones, and challenges, all the rest of it, but there are also real possibilities, much more than we normally have, because we've all had to rethink things at a very fundamental level. We've had to find new skills, we've had to find new creativity, and this is a great time to be doing that at the city level as well. So I think it's not all negative. My original submission had a part that was on the things that you were originally asking for comments on, so I won't comment on that stuff. I'll just do the first page of it, which is to do with what I wrote post-COVID, post the beginning of COVID. First of all, the first 3 points that I had and the 7 points were all to do with rates. And I see from the ODT that you've had a lot of focus on that yesterday. So I don't think I need to probably revisit those, although I've got a slightly different take on it from the ODT's report of the Chamber of Commerce. I don't think, I wasn't thinking in terms myself of a 0 rate increase. I think we should have a limited rate increase. And I would think the absolute maximum would be half of what was originally proposed. Would seem to me to be a better way to go, because I don't want to do more borrowing. And I know that some of you think that's a good way to go at this point, but I don't. Partly because I think we should be focusing on things that I was going to call basic, but the trouble with that is that we don't all agree on what's basic. But I don't think it's a time for grand visions and all that kind of stuff. And I think that generally speaking, our rates should cover our ordinary living expenses. So I'm not keen on borrowing more money and having the burden of repaying that accumulate down the track. The only other thing I'd say about those first 3 points is that you also were asking for comments on the proposed rating change, which, as I said, I didn't really quite understand because I don't have enough knowledge of what the proposal was actually, what it covers, what the community services target rates. I don't know what those are, what that covers. So therefore, I don't know whether it's fair to shift it around, who pays it or whatever. But I do think that this is not a time to be loading up the commercial sector. So if this involves a fundamental change of getting the commercial sector to pay more so that other people can pay less, I'm not sure that this is the very best moment to be talking about that. Anyway, that's just by the by. Okay, so moving on, the 4th point that I made was a big deal one for me, because I think that we need to, this is a hard thing to do, to change our thinking from what a number of us saw anyway, I'm sure, as wonderful city developing fast because of tourism and all that stuff, and growth, and seeing that population growth was a good thing, and the university getting bigger and bigger and bigger was a good thing, and all of that. And I think that some of those very fundamental things need to be changed round. And I think we should be focusing now, instead of on growth and on things like tourism, I think we should be trying to make our city the best it possibly can be for residents, for temporary residents. And that includes, in my book, students, and it also includes any visitors who, of course, we would continue to welcome. But it's a different kind of focus, and changing focus is not easy. Right, number 5 is one that that's what the supplementary piece of paper is about as well. This is really, I think, very important.
30 seconds left.
Abandoning and mothballing and deleting nice to haves and unsupported projects, and replacing those with renewal of aged infrastructure, undergrounding of wires, increase in public. No, I'll leave all that, you can read it. But I think that's, I tried to spell out a little bit more in the page that you've got in front of you, and that's shifting things into categories of A to D. And for my book, Zs should be just deleted. And I think the message that would send is as important as deleting them, because I think the council needs obviously to be seen and to be doing, to be reducing, not doing new large scale things. So I think that's incredibly important. I won't talk to number 6 or number 7, but I will just say that I think one of the things that needs to happen, and I know it does happen anyway, but to emphasize it, is that I think we need continuous improvement. I think we need creativity in all of our spending. We need to be looking at it bit by bit by bit, and not just taking enthusiastically a whole new plan and say, oh, this is great, this is wonderful, we'll get the best possible. I think every single bit of stuff needs to be, can we do this another way? Do we need to do all of the package? Could we do some of the package and still get almost all the benefits? That kind of thinking. And I'd like to see council treating financial decision making even more than they already do, I'm sure, as they would with spending their own money rather than spending somebody else's money. And can I have one more word?
Thank you, Ms. Bunce.
It's nothing to do with anything I've written, but it's just the word vibrant. If we could get rid of the vibrant word in all of our future planning documents, I would be absolutely thrilled. Because at the moment we seem to be justifying so many of our plans and things by saying we want an area more vibrant. And to me, that means more drunk people in the octagon or something. That doesn't mean anything positive. So that's neither here nor there. Okay, that's me.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, just checking. Are you happy to take questions?
Yes.
Councillor Gary and Councillor Walker.
Kia ora, Ms. Bunce. I just wanted clarification because I was a bit confused about your fourth point where you there was a contradictory sentence there around shifting from focusing on tourism to focusing on making the city the best it could possibly be. And your last category there was visitors. I guess what you were saying was turning from the focus on international to domestic tourism. Would that be true?
To me, visitors is not the same thing as tourism at all.
Okay.
So I was just trying to make tourism not the sort of huge thing that it has been in our recent development. We've got to acknowledge that it can't be as huge. It can't be quite as dominant.
So can you just explain to me your definition of visitors? Because for me, visitors are equivalent to tourists.
But it also includes all of the people who come to either Dunedin or New Zealand. And that includes, for instance, people coming to watch a graduation ceremony from all around the world. It certainly includes tourists, but it's just to slightly reduce the focus on the cruise ship thing is going to be, hopefully it will come back a little bit, but it's not going to be like it has been. It's that kind of, yeah.
Okay.
So
Thank you very
visitors,
much.
yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Walker.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Bunce. My question is around your point 7. I just want to say that considering that the Dunedin City Council's response to the COVID-19 pandemic has been lauded nationally as one of the best responses in the country, could you just comment on the fact that you talked about the disappointingly disjointed, back foot, poorly communicated DCC response to the pandemic? I'm just quite interested.
That is simply from where I sit. I'm not saying that it has been like that, but that's how it's seemed to me. I know those are very strong words, and it was very strong when I wrote it. As for instance, the communication about what counted, about the activities for council-owned reserves. The notices that went up several weeks into lockdown in at Logan Park, but they weren't very adequate notices. They didn't cover things. I met loads of people down there who were trying very hard to do the right thing, but they hadn't seen the notices, or they hadn't known this, or they hadn't known that. And so I guess that was one of the things that was in my mind at the time that I wrote that. Since then, we've had a lot more, we've had advertising in the paper, and we've had a lot more things. And at that time, I had no idea what the plan was at all for our recycling or anything like that. They're just the little bits and pieces. These aren't the big deal things. I'm sure the big deal things were being handled. But
Cool, thank you.
Just from the point of view of this one particular ratepayer at that moment in time, I wouldn't write it quite as strongly as that now at all.
Councillor Elder.
I think we could probably all say that we were caught rather quickly and off our guard with regard to, is it going now?
Yep.
Oh, thank you. We were all caught a little bit off our guard, and it's been pretty stressful for everyone, the adjustments we've had to make. And I think probably in the first instance, it takes a wee while to set up systems. But
absolutely, yeah, no, I appreciate that, yeah.
I think DCC's done a great job, and you've noticed that too, which is awesome. One of the things I just wanted to talk to you about is...
Sorry, is there a question coming, Councillor?
Yeah, there is. The development of the maintenance of walking tracks. There's been a survey of all the walking tracks, and were you aware that that the DCC are working closely with Doig and looking at a strategy around that and putting in for shovel-ready funding for upgrading some of our walking and cycling tracks?
Yes, I knew that I met the person who was doing that survey, and I'm delighted that they're doing it, but I was astonished to find a while back that there was no budget line for maintenance for tracks, so that if we had a problem with the tracks, then we had to scrabble around and try and find, you know, that kind of stuff. And I also walk frequently in the Logan Park so-called biking tracks area, and I think the signage, it's been a long time that the signage has been non-existent, falling to pieces or out of date, all that sort of stuff. And I know it's waiting for this great big overall thing, but in the meantime, we've had issues around the pandemic, including ones with, you know, serious injury and very near misses and all that kind of stuff that wouldn't have happened if we had better signing and so on. So it's a matter of doing the big picture thing and getting that right, and also doing the how long do we have to wait for the little picture stuff, you know. So, but I know it's moving, and I was really pleased to find the guy doing the
I encourage you in that area.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ms. Bunce. Thank you for your submission and for your time this afternoon. Appreciate it.
All right, bye.
Mr. Barlin up next.
Your worship, we're just going to ring Mr. Barlin to see.
Can be a bit of an internet black spot when you go through Ravensbourne, I've noticed. It does have its moments.
Yeah, so maybe that's issues. We're just going to give him a call and see what's happening.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, I can confirm there's a black spot there.
Your worship.
Otherwise, we can take Mr. Jory now, please. Welcome, Mr. Jory. The next 5 minutes are all yours.
All right, we'll fire ahead then. Stephen Jory, obviously born and bred in Dunedin and very passionate about all things Dunedin and Otago. So I'm married with 3 children, and I've been in the construction industry my whole working life. So I point out at this stage that I'm not a greenie by any stretch of the imagination, and my views are a bit more right than that. But I do believe that the climate has changed over the years, and I believe that we can use natural resources responsibly, things like oil and gas and steel. But I also believe more so that we can reuse the resources that we have after they reach their end of life. Timber, drink bottles, cans, glass, paper, steel, it's a very long list. So what frustrates me about is that in the case of the DCC waste management plan, is it's making a lot of statements that have no plan to reach your goals. In your waste management plan, you have some goals set of zero waste, have a circular economy that is fueled by renewable energy such as solar, hydro, wind, tidal, and biofuels. You don't seem to have any steps in place or no short-term goals to help you reach your goal. You then have 3 lines about your role as a leader in this field. And unfortunately, that's about all the leadership you've shown in this field to date. Council passed a motion declaring a climate emergency, but almost a year later, there's no tangible evidence that the council is tackling a climate emergency, and there is no evidence that anything has changed in the last year. Now, I was moved to make this submission after reading an article in the Otago Daily Times on the 25th of February 2020 about the demolition to make way for the new hospital. They estimated that 55,000 tonnes of waste would come from the site and hoped to recycle 4,000 tonnes, and the rest would be sent to landfill around Dunedin. Now, I do not believe there is 55,000 tonnes of waste, and with the right leadership, Dunedin could divert over 70% from landfill, therefore helping the goal of zero waste and a circular economy. So what do I want to see from the Dunedin City Council? I'd like to see you to advocate, facilitate and be sustainable. Advocate for the city and its people. It is unacceptable after doing things like declaring a climate emergency and then letting the government come in and give a tender to demo these buildings and send most of the waste to landfill. It is almost unbelievable that you could let this happen, and without even calling out the government. Now, I'd hate to see what 55,000 Ks of building waste looks like, but it won't be pretty. But if you had looked at my submission that I made, and if you'd followed the link, you would have found that there are places that can divert over 70% of building and demolition waste from landfill. So facilitate. The Dunedin City Council has facilitated many projects over the years. And I believe it is not the DCC's job to build a plant like the Green Gorilla plant in Auckland that I showed you. But I'd like to see the council, like it has on other projects like the hotel and etc., be proactive and facilitate opportunities like the Green Gorilla plant. And there must be other small plants that we could set up in Dunedin to recycle our own waste, plastics, papers, IT waste. By being a facilitator, you would be putting steps in place to reach your goals of zero waste, a circular economy, and you'll be showing some leadership. Now, as outlined in your waste management plan, a circular economy will be driven by renewable energy, solar, hydro, wind turbine and biofuels. Yet when a wind turbine is planned for Blueskin Bay, it gets turned down. Now, you may have to go to the government around the Resource Management Act, and sometimes the interests of renewable energy come above the opposition of a few locals. Sustainable. I would like to see the DCC, if it does not already, put an emphasis on sustainability. When you tender any works, price should not be the be all and end all. You need to consider the sustainable practices of the company that you will use. All new builds, the DCC incorporate sustainable components such as solar, LED lights, over-specified insulation, and products that can be reused at the end of life. Now, the company I work for work out of several regions in the country, and our sustainability manager has identified Dunedin as the hardest area to implement sustainable practices that are cost efficient for both the client and the contractor. Now, there is a lot of room for improvement around waste management in Dunedin. I've tried to stick to waste management around the construction industry that I do know and have had experience with. I think we can make some very easy and substantial gains with an increase in participation by the DCC in facilitating and advocacy in regard so we could be, and we will be able to be heading down the path to a sustainable future. But we do not waste time. The demolition is about to start. You need to at least call someone and make sure 55,000 tonnes of waste will not be filling up landfills in Dunedin, even if they are privately owned.
Thank you, Mr. Jory. Are you happy to take questions?
If you believe you're in a climate emergency, we must act fast and decisive. We must look at options of converting our own waste into reusable products.
Sorry, apologies for talking over the end. I thought you'd come to a natural pause. You happy to take questions?
Running out of breath. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I know the feeling. Councillor Raddick.
Yes, thanks for your submission, Mr. Jury. I'm curious about, being well experienced in the construction industry. The hospital rebuild, there are people that do recycle building materials or buildings, demolished buildings in Dunedin. And we saw a really good example with Carisbrook, for instance. All the materials was recycled by Corder Stewart there. And there's been various other contractors in town that do recycling. Is it your opinion that, what difference has it made having an out-of-town contractor do the demolition on the hospital? What difference is that going to make, do you think, to this recycling?
Oh, that's a pretty hard question to answer, really. I mean, I'm taking my information from what was in that newspaper article, and they said they're only going to recycle 4,000 tonnes. Now, there'd be well over 4,000 tonnes of concrete that could be crushed in Dunedin and reused for any number of projects, like underneath building slabs for all these houses we're building in Mosgiel. So whether they are not putting the effort in, whether the government didn't put enough emphasis on recycling, it's probably a number of things like that that would be the problem.
Thank you.
Councillor O'Malley.
Thank you, Bishop. Thanks, Mr. Jury. I know the same point about the hospital demolition, and had raised earlier on that actually where we're going to make sure recycling was in the demolition permits. Would you say that at least being a component that the city could do straight away is that when it's permitting demolition, it's got to put a recycling component in there to make sure that we are effectively making those people do it?
I think, it just sounds too ludicrous, that one, to be totally honest. The numbers are just staggering with the hospital, and I think really there are ways to do a lot better, really.
Do you think, it started, the contract's been given, but do you think it's worthy that the council have one more look at what this contract is doing in terms of?
That's what I probably said in the end. I think really, like I said, I'm definitely not a Green Party member, but I'm probably more blue. But why would anyone want 50-odd thousand tonnes of rubble dumped in our backyard? When thousands of those tonnes could be reused for other purposes. It looks to me like, look, I've been tried to be in touch with the with David Parker, David Clark, Eugenie Sage, or whatever her name is. I haven't had a hell of a lot of word back from them, and okay, maybe they're a wee bit busy at the moment, but like I said, it's, if your next door neighbour started dumping shit over your fence, you'd be pretty upset, and they're just dumping everything in landfills around the thing. Now, these landfills aren't actually owned by the Dunedin City Council, but all landfills are a problem or whatever, and if we're going to have zero waste, that has to be taken into account. And we're just you need to.
And would you also note that we're running into capacity issues until we get the Smooth Hill landfill running? So using up capacity quickly is not probably the best thing either, is it?
Well, it's not only the products that the demolition on a building site. You've also got all the demolition construction in the construction phase. Now, the Polytech are pretty hot on what happens to building construction and demolition materials on any job that they run. And a building company in Dunedin did a job for the Polytechnic. They they stood inside their skips and took a survey of everything they were getting rid of. And they considered that they recycled at site 100% more than they did on a standard job, but they still sent 90% of their waste to the landfill. That's after doubling their average diversion from landfill at the site. I mean, the building industry, I was speaking to my sustainability manager. She quoted somewhere that the construction industry creates about 50% of all waste to landfill. So, you know, we're a pretty hungry beast. But you mean, it's not only the stuff in the construction industry that worries me. You know, we've got plastic coming out our ears. China don't probably want it. Are there little, you know, boutique sort of recycling plants that could be set up that are, you know, recycling plastic, recycling, obviously, all the other things I'm talking about as well, that green gorilla do. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Jory, for your submission and for your time this afternoon. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Cheers.
We're going to have another crack at Bob Barlin, joining us by sound, if not vision. Which doesn't appear to be any more successful than our last attempt. Ms. Clements then, next, please. Kia ora, Fiona. We have 3 submissions in your name. Are you presenting them in the round, or do you want to present them all individually? I've noticed there's an over.
I'd like to present Resourceum and Stitch Kitchen together, and then SDC at the end following on from that, if that's okay.
Yeah, it's all good. Go for it. Next 5 minutes are yours.
Well, I have to say I've kind of got 10 actually, Aaron, because I've got 2 submissions, so thank you.
But you want to do it in 2 stages, is what I mean.
Well, yeah. Ko takitimu te maunga, ko aparima te awa, ko te ara a kiwa te moana, ko takitimu urua tuku waka, ko naitahu nā te māmoe waitahu tuku iwi, ko clan Gordon aho, ko takutai o te titi te marae, no otipoti taku kāinga inaine, ko Paul tuku mātua, ko Glennis tuku whaia, no Fiona tuku ikua. Kia ora.
Kia ora.
I just wanted to start by thanking you for your time today. I know you've been here all day and yesterday, and you've still got another day to go, and this can be a somewhat trying experience due to current circumstances, so thank you for sticking with it. I did send through some preliminary material with a couple of diagrams on it, and I'd really love to know if any of you are actually familiar with Kate Raworth's donut economics framework. Has anyone read that? Yeah, there's a couple of hands going up there. That's really great.
Yes, I've read it.
It's a really interesting one, and it shows us living within our planetary boundaries whilst being socially and environmentally responsible too. And I really see that vision as one that we need not just for our resources, but our business practices. And I encourage the DCC to become more familiar with this framework. There has been a recent development in Amsterdam where they are attempting to implement this framework, and you can look up the Amsterdam City Donut if you'd like to have a look at their PDF that they've put together, and it's a really great document, so I highly recommend that. There's also a butterfly economy image, which is where we find ourselves now, dealing with our feedback loops and creating markets for upcycled goods. And I just want you to take note that on the right, recycle is actually at the bottom of the list, yet it's the only solution we currently use. So Resourcem wishes to participate in resource recovery whilst operating within environmental limits. And within a true circular economy, it's not just a framework on paper, but it's one that works in reality. And to enable this, it must be done in collaboration and partnership with others. And so I'm assuming you've read my submission, and in that I am asking you to partner with Resourcem so that we can further the conversation about having a creative hub in Dunedin City, one that deals with resource recovery and also deals with the creatives that are really needing some space. And this would show a real commitment from the council in advancing the zero waste goals of the WMMP. Our current projects are that of creating a citywide database and a wash trailer. The database will consist of all recyclers, repairers, secondhand dealers and upcyclers in Dunedin so that we can better network and use those resources a lot better. The wash trailer will enable zero waste events throughout the city. We have a verbal commitment from the farmers market that this is a tool they would hire to service the market weekly. And we would love to talk to the council about their events and creating a zero waste kaupapa for those and how our wash trailer can make that happen. We do need to find a bit more funding for that particular part of the project, and we welcome your input for that. We are already in contact with Keep Dunedin Beautiful and your waste team about that specific piece of project. The end goal for Resourcem is a connected network of resource recovery for Dunedin City, and I'm talking about inorganics collection in that. And operating in a hub will enable that project greatly. A space where we can target schools, businesses and residents to collect their inorganic materials and divert them from landfill. Resourcem intends to have that available to local creatives and schools as a resource. A hub would be a wonderful space of connection and community to thrive, and this has been witnessed in my work with Stitch Kitchen. And as Stitch Kitchen turns 5 this year, I've reflected on those years of growth and what we now have capacity to achieve. We're incredibly grateful for all the funding we receive on a consistent basis from the council and other places, but our needs for storage, 400 kilos and counting, better accessibility and an affordable space that can enhance the creative network we have connected over those years. Stitch Kitchen in some aspects has been a well-intended feasibility study, and for the past year we've been trying to find new premises as our current place is no longer fit for purpose. We've looked at all sorts of properties, but our main issue has been finding something that ticks enough of our boxes without compromising on the space, as we have a huge need to grow and be able to hold more workshops, because that's the basis of our income, is being able to hold workshops. But to do that within our budget constraints, it's been incredibly difficult. Just before lockdown, we did manage to find a short-term space that with some negotiation with the landlord around price and us doing some of the fixing up ourselves, we can share and have a space each. So that means Stitch Kitchen and myself will have 2 separate spaces to be able to operate from. We hope to move in June, July and be ready for term 3 classes, depending on the current situation. We had to extend our budget slightly past our comfort zone, but we decided it was worth it to enable our growth. We are taking a risk, but it's a valuable one. We understand the need for community participation and education around waste issues, and we support the suggestion of a collaborative hub space as a long-term solution for us and where creators and community can flourish. Because we are going to find that we have more people out of work now and looking for creative ways to look after their mental health and keep themselves productively occupied. So Resourcem would also like to encourage the council to use their powers on the WMA section 56 to regulate businesses that operate in the waste sector to minimise waste to landfill. The aim is to use bylaws that will regulate businesses to operate using zero waste practices in their policy. Complementary to these bylaws would be to work with industry to create the tools and guidance for a shift to zero waste and waste minimisation. These actions are fundamental to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. You could also, and this is a little pet thing of mine, you could also create a bylaw around single-use plastic takeaway products and be the first city to go fully reusable and zero waste. Well, wouldn't that be amazing? There's more to be said, but instead of repeating myself twice, I will speak to those other things in the SDC submission, but we do tautoko those as 2 other entities of Resourcem and Stitch Kitchen. So I'd love to just break there before I head into SDC's prepared statement and maybe just take some questions if that's okay, or
happy for whatever works for you. We've got questions from councillors Walker, Barker and Houlihan.
Hey Fiona.
Yeah,
thank you for an excellent and fulsome submission. And to be honest, it's one of the best I've read during this process. And I have to say, your last paragraph is very opposite. It took me till I was halfway through the second one to realise I think the three submissions are the same. So, but didn't make it any less of a good read. But I do have a number of questions. So first one is, you talk about the partner collaboration with the DCC and the benefits it will accrue, obviously economically, socially, culturally, environmentally. So how do you see this this collaboration manifesting itself, and what could we, the DCC, do to make it happen? So that's question number one.
So I guess the way I see it is we need affordable space, and space that's big enough to actually function in. And I guess I see it as kind of something like the Valley Community Workspace, but it's slightly different in that it's around, you know, sharing resources and creative space for workshops and that sort of thing. So realistically, it's about providing space.
Okay, and the Valley project would be a sort of perfect sort of template.
Yes, it is. Yep.
Okay, cool. So my second question is, you also encourage user pays by weight when it comes to wheelie bin collections. I understand the principle behind your comment, but do you agree that the evidence from across the world shows that this would impact disproportionately on poorer people less able to pay?
It probably would, yes. I think we need to have services that everyone can that are available to everybody. Yeah.
Okay. So. Question three, and we'll fire through these. And I think you've covered this a wee bit. You've suggested that you need a space for yourself, stitch kitchen, curtain bank, etc. Yeah. What type of space constitutes affordable? And
well, I've over the past year in looking for spaces, it's been incredibly difficult. A large enough space to actually operate from, and for this kind of thing, you're looking at 70k plus a year. We just don't have that financially, and we also need to be able to be financially sustainable and being able to sell products and also sell workshops and do the education stuff. So realistically, right now we do need that kind of support to make it happen for the city. That's just, you know, like we don't have that kind of money coming in.
Okay. And final question is, you've talked a lot about recycling and supporting that. And although I can read that you obviously support our zero waste 2040 goal, I think we can all agree that's a long way off. I'll probably be long dead. And I don't know if you've listened to many of the submissions that have been going on the last 2 days, but I've been banging on about my desire to see far more effort put on manufacturers at source to make sure we don't get any waste in the first place. Presumably you support that notion.
Absolutely, I definitely support product stewardship, and I think the central government has a lot of work to do there in making that happen for us. But like, what do we do in the interim, I guess, is the question.
Cool, thank you, great submissions. Good luck.
Thank you.
Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Mayor Hawkins. Kia ora, Fiona.
Kia ora.
It's a great submission, thank you. I just, Steve has asked a couple of my questions, or our questions. Sorry, Councillor Walker. I just wondered, for a more practical question, what square meterage were you looking for the hub?
You're probably thinking around over 600 metres squared, really, because you want to be able to fit in small businesses that can have their little studio spaces as well as workshop spaces and storage for resources and that sort of thing.
Yeah, following on from, we had somebody submit this morning about the Sims building at Port Chalmers, and I was like, oh, maybe we could put one and one together and make two, because they were also talking about having small businesses and their attractions, and I just wondered whether that might be a possibility. Not built yet, so not immediately available.
Yeah,
that's great to hear. Thank you.
It sounds a bit too far out of town. I'm thinking something more central city would be ideal. Yeah.
Thank you.
None taken. Councillor Houlihan.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, kia ora te titi marae myself as well, so kia ora te iwi. Can I just check, have you approached, I assume you've approached people like Heidi at Innovate and looked around Petri dish and things like that? Have you, or because I know they've got some space and
they're not really viable spaces for what I'm talking about. Yeah.
right, not big enough, or
no, nowhere near big enough. Yeah.
right, yeah. Okay, because I know at Petri dish they have added quite a bit more space, but yeah, that's fair enough. And are you thinking they're creatives? Oh, sorry.
The accessibility at Petri dish is a bit of an issue. It's downstairs and in a basement of the space that they're wanting to do. So yeah, stairs don't really work for this sort of work.
Right, yeah, yeah. I think, did I see you present once at Keep It Beautiful Awards where you had you were
Yes.
doing the things with the elephants, the
Yes.
doorstops
Yeah.
and things,
Yeah.
right, yeah, they were great. So can I just check, when you're talking about a collaborative hub, because I'm really in support of collaborative clusters, I think it's a great idea and a lot of innovation comes from that. Are you thinking about similar types of creatives or all sorts of creatives? What's your ideal?
I think more work needs to be done around who would be in that space, but I know myself there's a lot of conversations going on in the community from food resilience and creatives that are really looking for space alongside the Dunedin Environment Centre space. So the community's really wanting this sort of thing right now, and it just feels like the right time to kind of make something like this happen.
Yes, well, as a few of the others have said, other councillors have said, we've had some submitters over the last few days who have been looking at food waste and food resilience. So maybe, and quite a few of them are talking about a coordinator, maybe it could be put together as a hub, like that, as you're saying. Wonderful. Yeah. Oh, well, all the best. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor O'Malley.
I will keep it brief. I think this will be a great thing for the long-term plan and fitting into the Waste Futures plan. Because we need something like this if we're going to get that whole section of diversion worked properly. So that's just my feedback, that I think it's great for you to come here this time, but I reckon we should work together to get it into the LTP.
I'd love to do that, Jim. That'd be fantastic. Love to further that conversation.
Thank you. Councillor Gary.
Thanks, Your Worship. Tēnā koe, Fiona. I was interested to know about the growth in your workshops. I'm familiar with your work from various applications, grant applications that you've made. And I'm also interested in your relationship with the Curtin Bank, which does really important work. And you mentioned them in terms of a hub.
Yeah. We have talked to the Curtin Bank about moving into the same space together, because last year we really started looking at who would work with us or who would be viable. I know that they don't want to move at the moment because financially what they have is affordable, and so for them we know that they can't afford more than 10 to 12 grand a year, and we're about the same. So realistically, that's kind of where it's at. Those are the things, limits we have on what we're doing, and if we could afford 20-40 grand, we'd be there already. We'd be able to take in more stuff and we'd be doing that, and we would love to find a space which is actually more accessible, because the Curtin Bank's upstairs and it's actually quite hard to access as well. So that would be an amazing thing for us to be in the same place, because we get so many donations of curtains, it's ridiculous.
Thank you. And what about workshops? Has there been a growth in your workshop uptake?
Yes, there has. They're fully booked. Right up until lockdown, they were fully booking out, and with more space, because right now we can only take 6 people per workshop. With more space, we'd actually be able to take up to 10, which would mean that we've got more income coming in. And it is the best way of us to get income, workshops. It's very, very, and I know now the engagement that we're getting online is just amazing, and people are really looking for things to keep themselves busy with, and being able to come in and get stuff from us is something they're really looking to.
So the right space is absolutely pivotal to your future. Hey, thank you for that answer.
Councillor Reddick.
Yes, question, is the Green Island Resource Centre just too far out of town?
It seems so. I mean, people do use it, but instead of going there, they tend to go to the waste management dump in town and just dump stuff because it's closer. Yeah.
In terms of your setup for you, or in terms of having an area with an expanded setup for you?
I would prefer somewhere central city, but I do believe that rummage is still very much needed, and it should expand. I very much support that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cool. Is that all your questions? Awesome. No,
Take
one more.
advantage of the pause where you can.
So this is just a follow on. This is a prepared statement from Sustainable Dunedin City. We're an incorporated society. I'm the chair of that society. I represent just under 400 members of the community and around 700 members who are a bit less formal in their membership. We advocate for positive, secure and sustainable future for Dunedin City. In our submission, so this piece was prepared by someone else, so if there's any questions around this, I might have to direct you to someone else. But in our submission in relation to rates, we mentioned a UAGC, a Universal Annual General Charge. The annual plan document did not illustrate specifically how this value would be determined, but we encourage and support that this value should not be more than 20% of the rates revenue collected by DCC, and we feel that this would be a reasonable approach that is fairer for all. In relation to the transport sector and public transport, we tautoko the DCC's decision for a free low carbon electric bus Central City Loop service trial, and we see value in a reduced bus fare, but also emphasise the importance of balancing the reduced bus fare rates with improving how the service operates. We see value in specifically including the following: investing in staff to improve quality of service, i.e. training drivers on best practice, upskilling on customer service and sharing information, investment in technology to give real-time bus information via apps and bus stops, and considering how public transport infrastructure works with other transport options such as cycle lanes and pedestrians. And we also encourage smaller buses to cope with the small amount of users. We understand that the bus service is operated by ORC, therefore the above is why we strongly support more collaboration and dialogue with them. We also ask the council to engage with community groups such as Busco and the Disabled People's Network to improve and increase usability and patronage. In addition to this, we encourage the council to use their regulatory powers to put businesses on notice, such as those providing bus services, to move to a full electric fleet by 2025. And this should be a gradual process, e.g. over the next 5 years, they need to gradually replace existing stock with electric. We also support the inclusion of cycleways that connect Waitiri, Warrington and Karatani, as you've heard earlier from Mandy. We love the new WMMP and its move towards a circular and holistic approach to resources and waste for Dunedin City. We're also encouraged by the inclusion of kaitahu in this area, but we wonder a lot about your implementation plan, as we have been left with many questions of how this plan will be actioned and how DCC will show itself as a leader in this area. We acknowledge there is a lot of work to be done here. Given the how may yet to be developed in detail, we emphasise and strongly encourage that delivering this plan will be best achieved through inclusion of all stakeholders in the conversation, such as kaitahu, the community groups already participating in waste minimisation, small, medium and large businesses and the general public. We encourage the DCC to use its regulatory powers to create bylaws to assist the community and businesses to minimise their waste. The right bylaws could create a significant difference in how we shift and encourage others to do so. And we would welcome any kōrero around this idea in regards to our city's resources. We've been made aware of community groups that are on the ground already participating in different sectors of waste minimisation and feel compelled to encourage the council to look at supporting these groups to expand their reach in Dunedin. The need for support for these groups goes beyond community grants, etc., to back up DCC's proposals and stated intention to increase community development and collaboration. The request for support is for developing a space, potentially from DCC available building stock, to set up a creative community regeneration hub for groups to link to, grow, and to enable easier consultation and collaboration between council and existing community groups that are ready to continue the good work they've been doing. There are already a large pool of community groups who are talking and researching what's needed. The main inhibiting factor, as you've just heard, is the right space to operate from at a sustainably affordable price, and we encourage the council to partner with these groups on this matter. We also encourage the council to look at how it can support better food resilience in the city, and we support the suggestion from our food network to shift the Good Food Coordinator position out of Enterprise Dunedin and into either the policy team or the community development team to enable a stronger focus on food resilience. We believe food resilience is a top priority for the community. In regards to community housing, we support the council to open up areas for self-building, including tiny houses, and making regulation compliance easier for people to develop their own sustainable housing. future-proofing our housing to be safe and efficient and also available for everyone in Dunedin for physical, mental health and productivity of our city. Working with the developers to create socially mixed housing areas is encouraged alongside allowing different types of builds such as straw bale and apartment style homes. In regards to the city centre redevelopment, the recent Octagon experience was an interesting experiment to see what might work as part of the Central City Main Street redevelopment. We encourage innovative planting in this space and for real thought to be put into whether this redevelopment is currently a top priority due to the circumstances we're in now. And we believe that planting will reduce stormwater runoff and other initiatives can assist to mitigate the forecast effects of climate change as well as absorbing and sinking carbon. We'd love to see design options incorporating this in the council's consideration to raise public engagement. And a similar approach to the waterfront redevelopment and build up public support. The bridge and waterfront redevelopment projects need to be shelved. We don't believe there's space for those now. SDC recognises the current effect of the coronavirus, emphasising other higher priority investment in the next decade. The redevelopment of the waterfront can happen at a much later date if needed, depending on sea level changes and long-term needs of the city. The Arts Centre proposed as part of the waterfront redevelopment is badly needed in the city to keep the wide variety of creatives in Dunedin who continue to keep the city culturally vibrant. And you can refer to my earlier comments about this, but we do see the potential in buildings such as the former Kingwood Technical College being well located and reasonably laid out for conversion into a multi-purpose space for arts development, studios and performance. Purchasing and retrofitting this building would be more in line with the circular economy model than creating an entirely new one, and supporting a creative hub would also help this issue. We support and see the importance of redesigning South Dunedin whilst looking several decades in advance and setting a precedent for how the area can be regenerated. Working with natural systems such as waterways, an example could be creating a new waterway, i.e. a canal along the natural watercourse, rather than spending millions on redirecting water away from where it needs to flow. We encourage a long-term evaluation for feasibility of people living in the area and their homes' viability against sea level rising, given the very high water table already a prominent characteristic for the area. We question if South Dunedin is a viable place for development or if we need to look at returning it to its former natural glory and relocating to other places as a long-term solution. We'd also love to be able to track how the city improves on such projects through something like an environmental dashboard, such as the one Oberlin has set up. If you look up environmentaldashboard.org, you'll find that. It's really cool to look at. There's heaps of really great numbers going on in there. That's pretty much it from me. Thanks for taking the time today. It's an awesome process to participate in, and we're grateful that the circular economy conversation is on your table. We look forward to engaging with the DCC in the future. Thank you.
Kia ora, Fiona. Any further questions after that? No. Clear as day. Thank you so much for all the effort that has obviously gone into putting together such a robust submission and expanding upon that with us this afternoon. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Look forward to
Mr. Barlin, I believe, is calling in.
Hello, Bob speaking.
Welcome, Bob. You made it.
Yeah, at last.
Yeah, that's
My
right.
goodness, what a good thing technology is.
It's beautiful, beautiful. Hey, the next 5 minutes are yours to use as you choose.
Okay, do you want me to start talking now?
Well, that would be a useful use of that 5 minutes, I reckon.
Okay, very well. Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and all the councillors. Thank you for hearing me today. You've already seen my written comments, so I can't really speak to that very much more than what's already there. It's not very clear when you're talking about a number of things, but that's not the important one. The important one for this is the current difficult times we're going through as a country and as in the world. And I've been in an awful lot of disaster zones, and I can't see this one getting good for at least a year or two. Now, the council has got a few problems. because you have to minimize your losses and pay your debts as well. And you're going to be earning nothing from the airport or the stadium or a lot of other places for quite some time. And at the same time, you've got a lot of people who, as Rachel said in the newspaper, are suffering from PTSD. And I agree with that. It may not be PTSD in its pure form, but they're certainly scared as. And what's going to cause it? We might, as a country, go down quite well. But America and other places are not going down well, and people will be watching that and they'll be scared accordingly. Now, the key to starting up is the small businesses and get money moving. So I really do think there's got to be a way to give our small businesses and people living at home as much possibility to survive and to start up, whether that means we start up a small business foundation as a city, and you've got enough councillors that know how to do that. But businesses pay two lots of rates. They pay commercial rates and they pay their personal rates. And I would be inclined, hopefully, to try and minimize their expenses. And what I possibly would do, if you have the money and if you can do it without taking on more debt, is to completely stop all rates the next section, not for a year, but just for the next instalment. You could qualify that by saying, okay, we'll only do it to businesses or we'll only do it to houses. But I think there's got to be a move of some sort. You don't need to lower the increase, but you do need to give people a relief. The government's giving them relief, and it would be good if you could join the party and give them relief as well, because in the future, there could well be the opportunity to ask the government for money, and you will have proved your point by giving it to the people. Basically, it's humanity. You've got to help at the moment because there's a lot of people out there that are scared as, although they may not say so. And in council, you need the courage to do the right thing for those of the people of the city that you lead. And you need to stand up and do the right thing for the people. I read in the paper the other day, you're laying off, or not you, but 50 railway workers are being laid off, and it's sort of blaming the council as their council employees. I can't quite figure out how that happens, because people should have got a payment from the government, which means they didn't need to be paid off. They just needed to be kept on the books. But I don't think I can talk anymore. Is there any questions at your end?
We'll soon find out, Bob. Questions? Councillor Raddick.
Thanks for your submission. And I'm just wondering, you know, we have got a little bit of a contradiction here, and we've had this a few times today, and various people have been quizzed about it. And people do want rates reductions or a zero rate increase. And in your case, lowering it by a quarter is quite a dramatic decrease in rates. But operational costs within the council carry on regardless. So we've got a large staff that maintain infrastructure and so on. And, you know, there's a lot of things that need to be paid for on an ongoing basis, which no one wants to do without, and without taking on debt. Did you have any particular idea of where the money would come from?
I don't know what the overall council money side of things is. What I would presume you guys would be doing would be working out what debt has to be paid and cannot be forborne. And then working it right down to what essential infrastructure jobs have to be done to maintain the peace and security of the people within the council area. Perhaps it may work out that a complete quarter of your income is too high, and I stand by that. But you really do need to have a very good look at what cannot be, what has to be paid, i.e. debt, and also what can be forgiven. And only you guys know how to do that. You know the figures exactly. None of us do. But I think as a council, it would be nice if the people could see some refuge in whatever decision you make.
Yes, certainly there's a lot of enthusiasm amongst various submitters to have at least a zero rates increase. Okay, so that would mean, you know, some very hard, very difficult decisions about what operational costs to cut. However, one thing I'm surprised not to see in your submission was a solution to inner city parking, which is the highest cause of dissatisfaction in the city. And you have postulated a...
Councillor Raddick, if you could restrict your questions to the submission that you have in front of you, that would be helpful.
Okay. I was just going to ask if there was any reason why you hadn't.
I know what you're going to ask. Councillor Gary?
Thank you, Your Worship. Hello, Mr. Barlin, and thank you for your submission. Really interested to hear your comments from the perspective of your background in disaster relief, in how you perceive how you think New Zealand is currently perceived. And I just want to tell you where this comment comes from. So there was a journalist based in Paris who yesterday wrote about how attractive New Zealand is to the big corporates. And in her briefing at 1 o'clock today, the PM talked about Microsoft and its decision announced today, apparently, around a data centre, a cloud-based data centre that it's looking to establish here in New Zealand. How do you think New Zealand will be perceived now in the world due to how we've managed and where we're up to in terms of COVID-19?
Well, that's yet to be seen because it's early days. There's too much going on in the world. We are just a microcosm of it, and we're not the centre of it. We've done a very good job up until now, and I think between us and Australia, we've done an extremely good job. We've thought of the people first, and we've always been seen as an escape hole because people build bunkers here, apparently. But the problem is that being a global pandemic, we can stand clear of it. But then again, if other people start to come down here, they may bring more problems. Is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, I was really asking if you saw opportunity in the way New Zealand's perceived from the experiences you've had in your background.
Well, yeah, we've always been seen that way. We've attracted an awful lot of money over the years because of our clean, green image and a number of things that we're away from things. I think we could really do well in the future. There's absolutely no doubt about that. We'd hum along. I've got a great deal of admiration for New Zealand and the way we do business. But after look at how long it took to recover from the Christchurch earthquake, and then think about this one, which has got a lot more people scared out of their wits. And it's that fear that you're fighting at the moment. And
Sure.
You've got to be careful how you handle that.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you for your submission and for your patience this afternoon, Bob, and for your input. Very helpful.
Well, I hope so, Your Honour, or Your Worship, whatever the correct terminology is. Thank you very much for putting up with my case today. I appreciate it.
It's okay.
And good luck to you all in the future.
Thanks, Bob. Megan and Philippa, representing the DSO. Megan's here twice. You're on mute, however. The next 5 minutes are all yours.
Thank you. I'm just waiting to see if Philip has joined.
Doesn't appear to be successfully connected. We've got a box, black box where her face would be otherwise.
Okay.
Can you plow on?
I
Yes,
can,
Jo.
yes.
Welcome, Philippa. You're on mute.
Am I?
No, not anymore.
Oh, good. Shall I start?
The next 5 minutes are all yours, the two of you.
Thank you very much to the Dunedin City Council for the opportunity to address the annual plan meeting. I'm joined this afternoon by Megan Bartlett, who is chair of the orchestra's board. There were two issues that we addressed in our submission. Megan will be dealing with the second one, which relates to our grant from the grant subcommittee. And I'll be dealing with the issues relating to the hire of the town hall, the charges, the processes, and also issues relating to the community access grant. We would first like to start by thanking the Dunedin City Council very much for your ongoing and significant support of the orchestra for all of the orchestra's 54 years. It allows us to present high quality orchestral experiences for a very wide range of audiences. We present masterworks like Beethoven's Ode to Joy, Carmen Burana. We present projects for diverse audiences like the Dunedin Sound Tally Ho concerts and also songs of Moana. And we accompany choral, ballet and operatic collaborations. Last year, 7,600 young school children around Dunedin and Otago enjoyed our education projects. That's a vital part of what we do too. We note our contributions to the 4 key strategic themes of Aratoi: identity pride by showcasing Dunedin's outstanding talent, creative economy by employing a large number of people in Dunedin and attracting central government investment of $330,000 annually. Access and inclusion, I mentioned briefly the diversity of audiences that we attract, and inspired connections through our digital access. I'd like to address the issue of the hire of the town hall through an example of which draws together all the points we make. Use an example of booking the town hall for July next year. If I pencil booked it now, it would stand for 3 months, but then DVML can cancel that booking without notice. If between now and May, June next year, we are challenged for that date, we need to pay the commercial rate for that hire. Otherwise, we'd relinquish the booking, and which means also we're not allowed to apply for the community access grant for that hall hire. We are only allowed to apply for the community access grant for 1 hire every 6 months. We usually have 4 concerts, so that automatically rules out 2 of our concerts for the community access grant. We can no longer apply to trusts to support our hire of the town hall because they require evidence via bank statements of the hall hire expenditure, but now DVML takes it out of our ticket income. So there is no evidence that we have spent that money on hall hire. To get that community access grant for July, we apply in June. And in May or June, sorry, we apply in January and we get the result in May, June. That means only in May, June of next year will we know that we have that certainty of the hall hire via the contract and what the cost is. In other words, whether we've got the community access grant or not. Of course, we've already hired our international artists and put the concerts on sale many months ago. So we are committed to that date, regardless of the outcome of that grant application. Taking a view overall over a year, that means our hall hire cost could vary between $29,000 and $56,000. That's a big difference, and it makes it impossible to budget accurately. It makes it impossible to apply for funding applications accurately. Also, that cost of $56,000 is a 318% increase on the 2013 charges. The increases in the DVML rates is quite out of kilter with the income that we receive from our other income streams. This difference has a serious financial effect on the Dunedin Symphony Orchestra, which cannot be underestimated. Hence, we seek an urgent review of the hire of the town hall processes, the charges, and also of the community access grant. Thank you, and I hand over to Megan now.
Thank you, Philippa.
Thank you, Megan. You have 1 minute.
Oh, okay, that's very quick. Yeah, we are asking for consideration be given to increase the funding available to the grant subcommittee so that organisations such as the orchestra can be funded to a level to ensure our sustainability. Now, the sustainability of the orchestra is part of our strategic objectives and a key focus for us. So it's not a situation where we're looking to simply come to organisations such as the council, which is a major funder of ours, to look for support. We've taken a lot of steps ourselves to ensure our sustainability. Part of our key focus, we've been looking to broaden our audience. That's obviously going to increase for us our ticket sales, but it's also going to be for us essential to increase our audience and diversity moving forward. And we've had a lot of success with this in the last year. We've had player present concerts, which are smaller. They are pay-as-you-go admission, and they've in a more casual format at the Hanover Hall, which have been capacity audiences. We've had our Queenstown concert, which is the first time in Queenstown, which has enabled us, that was a collaboration with the Turn Up the Music Trust, and that's aimed to expand our supporter base also. We've had other, we've got this year our audience program, which has included Beethoven's Bash, which is bringing together a community play and concert orchestra of a mass in the town hall. And we are looking to move further from our success of the Moana concert with a family concert in the Halloween Spectacular in October, which was on our agenda too. Essentially, we have been able to sustain our funding and our services to date by sensible financial management. We have been successful. We've raised previously the full $350,000 that we required ourselves to fit out the Hanover Hall, which was a project which came on time and within budget. And we have, we've also been able to, at present, because of the value the orchestra brings to the community and the success of its own endeavours, we have in the last few years been able to sustain ourselves in terms of drawing on existing relationships for donors. However, we are experiencing an annual deficit on average of about $28,000.
Thanks, Megan. I wonder if it might be useful to wrap it up there and take questions if people have any.
If I could just wrap up, what we wanted to draw the council's attention to, that these two issues that we have been talking about apparently may seem unrelated, but in fact they are interrelated, with increased costs, and the council's funding from the grant subcommittee is essential for the ongoing stability of the orchestra. And we ask council to review, please, the funding to the grant subcommittee, to allow it to help sustain us, and also to review the town hall hire processes.
Thank you, Philippa. Questions? Councillor Houlihan.
Kia ora, thank you for your presentation. Yeah, I think a lot of, well, I don't think I know, a lot of arts organisations have been hit by this crisis, and it's really hard. So I'm really sorry to hear that. It sounds like also this is an ongoing problem for you though, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. This is not something that's just arisen. It has been an issue for us since the DVML took over the running of the town hall 2013. We do understand that they are driven by financial imperatives. That's in their strategic plan, and I do refer to those in the submission. Hence our request for a review.
Right. Have you applied for funding, I assume, through Creative New Zealand and some other avenues as well for this? Is there any other areas you've applied to?
We receive annual funding from Creative New Zealand. Yes, we apply for increases from them. We don't always get them, but we do. And of course, we also get a significant grant from the Otago Community Trust. We apply to several trusts every year. That's mainly to fund our education programs. And we have sponsorships and so on. I can supply that information to you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you both for your time and your submission. Very clear.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, I'm juggling multiple things. Our last submitter for the day is Louise Mainville. Welcome, Louise. Once you take yourself off mute, the next 5 minutes are yours.
Thank you very much. I'll set my timer.
Very helpful.
Tēnā koutou katoa, Mayor Aaron Hawkins and councillors. Thank you for caring about our great little city and spending the last 2 days listening to concerned citizens like myself. I know it's not an easy feat, but I thank you for doing so. The COVID-19 crisis has really brought into sharp focus our city's future food resilience needs, and food access is key. Today, I hope to inspire you to be bold and to lead the development of a cross-sector DCC food strategy to support Dunedin's food resilience. I commend Enterprise Dunedin's initial groundwork in this area, and there's more to be done. And so I think there's a wider conversation that needs to happen to set the strategic direction for future work. So if you don't mind, I'll share my screen in a few slides that I've prepared that you should have access to. My name's Louise Mainville, and I'm a public health dietitian. I'm sure you're aware of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and I'm sure you're working hard to meet that. But sustainable development has food as a basic human right, and food plays a role in most of these sustainable development goals. And so food is an important and key element of looking at what sustainable development might look like in the future. As DCC, I wanted to do a quick environmental scan of policies to see, are we prepared? Again, looking at some of the issues that were raised in the COVID crisis around food access came into mind. And when I looked at the DCC's priorities, outcomes, and goals, I noticed that food, water, and shelter, those basic human necessities of life, were covered off when we looked at those priorities and goals. However, when I went that next step and looked at DCC policies and strategies, they weren't there to the same extent. And certainly food strategy or policy was missing. And finally, when I looked at the community outcome indicators, neither food, water, or shelter had a specific community outcome indicator. And if you're of the mind that what gets measured gets done, then I think there's some gaps there around what are our goals, what are our strategies, and what outcomes and how we're measuring them. And so I feel that there's a gap in this area of food policy. And the reason why I think this is important is because I think there's some threats to future food affordability. We know that there's likely to be decreasing food supplies with global climate change, which will declining crop yields and declining fish stocks, which will decrease our food supply. I'm also aware that there's an increasing food demand. So with global food security and biofuels, we're likely to have increasing food demand. And what happens in that perfect storm is that food prices go up. And what I'm concerned about also as we look to the future is looking at the future of work and employment opportunities, and especially in times of recession and depression and the income constraints this has. And this creates a perfect storm for whether people can afford healthy, can access and afford healthy food. So there are many frameworks that are out there. The climate change impacts on health are established in the academic literature, and these are mediated through the food system and also food security. So if we look first of all at food production and processing and preparation and consumption, we can see there that, sorry, I just realized that I need to be, I realize my screen is not looking like it's supposed to. Anyway, food systems are there. We need to have policy in this area that covers everything from food production, whether that's commercial or non-commercial sources, right through to processing, distribution, and the preparation and consumption of it. We also need to have food security, looking at the availability, accessibility, and the utilization of that, and not having food waste. So a food policy needs to compass all these kind of components of the complex food system, and not just focus on niche areas of that overall picture. We also know that determinants are around economic, social, and environmental determinants of these outcomes. So when you look at food policy outcomes and what indicators or outcomes we might be looking for from this food policy, we want to make sure there's economic sustainability. We need more income for food producers and sellers. If they're medium and large enterprises, we're looking at profit. If it's small operations, maybe it's sustainable livelihoods. But we also want to make sure that with that economic sustainability, it's reduced the vulnerability to shocks that might be out there with climate change and other health issues like COVID-19. With environmental sustainability, the outcome we're looking for is more sustainable use of natural resources, and that's soil, water, air, and biodiversity. And finally, when we look at the social sustainability, we're looking at improved food security. It's that everyone should have access to affordable, healthy, New Zealand grown food that's culturally acceptable. And that should increase well-being. And again, we're looking for reduced vulnerability to shocks. So these would be the outcomes that I would see that could be part of what a food policy is that we would be aiming for. So just to wrap up, I think the DCC it's an opportune time for the DCC to show some real leadership in this area, develop a Dunedin food policy. I encourage you to be bold to develop a local government strategy to make Dunedin food resilient. I think that we need to do this now to invest in our future, and some investment is needed really to get this high-level strategic thinking and strategic direction formulated. I think that somehow there needs to be someone that develops this and leads this food strategy that has food on their mind. And it should be cross-sector, across food system and food security, integrated policy that makes sure we're looking at outcomes across the economic, environmental, and social sustainability continuum. And again, like I said, that will provide strategic direction, not only to the DCC initiatives and local initiatives, but maybe also to regional initiatives. And I think the DCC is well placed to lead this piece of work. And we have capacity in Dunedin with sufficient expertise to help guide the strategic planning process. So again, the outcome there is that everyone living in Dunedin has easy access to food that's affordable, healthy, New Zealand grown, and culturally acceptable. And Good Food Dunedin has been working on these outcomes, but I think there needs to be a broader conversation about where the non-commercial and the commercial food interests lie, where there's a room for kind of the full gamut of scale of food access that we need, acknowledging that at this point, Dunedin does rely on international imports as well as domestic food production. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm trying to unmute myself. Thank you, Dr. Mainville. I appreciate the presentation. Are you happy to take questions? Just need you to unshare your screen so I can see all of the people. Councillor Raddick.
Thanks, Louise. Very interesting presentation. There's been a lot of submitters today talking about food resilience and sustainability and supply and so forth. I was a bit concerned about your graph in number 2 slide, where as price goes up, both supply and demand go up. Do you have any comment on that?
I think in the graph where I put the box around, that shows where prices go up when there's a high demand for a limited food supply, and that's when food prices go up. So I foresee in a future with climate change where food supply can be decreased and there's still going to be a global demand for food, that then those food prices will go up. So that's the argument that I was proposing there that has also been established in international literature as a likely outcome of climate change.
Okay, so in our local situation and a more immediate future, how do you resolve the conundrum between lower income households and high priced food you want to have in the market?
So I think that, you know, in an uncertain future with climate change, I think we have to realize that we have to have multiple avenues of accessing food. So I see that there still is the traditional food supply, as well as maybe a more localized, non-commercial food supply or smaller scale food supply, so that we have more options, and that's what creates resiliency. And I think in both of those cases, there's an opportunity to feed those, such as Kiwi Harvest does with rescuing food and then getting that out to the most vulnerable people in society. However, I've done research where we're looking at the acceptability of that type of outcome. And that's where we have to make sure that the people receiving those food items feel that that's a culturally and appropriate way to access food. And obviously there could be work that needs to be done on how do we make sure that people are accessing food in a culturally safe way for them.
So do you not think we've already got that covered with farmers market, kind grocer and other local suppliers already?
The research that I did early on suggested that there is a certain type of customer that goes to the Otago farmers market, and they tend to be the more concerned ethical citizens. And that I think there's, when we tried to have the Otago farmers market in South Dunedin, it wasn't as successful. And I don't know, I know there was some research done around that. But I think we have to understand that sometimes we could be really well intentioned on helping people that are doing things hard, but we really have to go to them and find out what works for them and what they feel comfortable doing, and work from that kind of perspective.
So do you think perhaps some specific qualitative research might be helpful?
Well, I think there's
people.
Yeah, I think it does require, it's how do we meet that? And maybe if there's opportunities for people to contribute to initiatives so that they can feel, the research that I did look at the cultural acceptability of food sources. One place, if people went to work and they got a meal at work, they liked that because they felt they were doing their bit for society by doing their work, but they also got a free meal out of it. And that helped then support at home where they didn't have to have such a large food budget. So initiatives need to be appropriate so people still feel like they're contributing to society and that they're doing that in a meaningful way. And then they're also able to meet their food needs.
Thank you.
Councillor Walker.
Yeah, thank you, Louise. I'm very cognizant of time here. And just say it's never easy being the last presenter of the day, but your excellent submission definitely reignited my fading brain. Very brief question. You've had some excellent submissions today on food resilience, many of which have asked to shift the food resilience position at the Dunedin City Council from enterprise Dunedin into either policy or community development. Do you think this is wise, and would you support it?
I guess I have mixed feelings about that because I think it should be its own strategy. And I guess in economic development, when I look through the economic development strategy for the DCC, food only really was about food retail. And that concerned me about where does food resilience really sit within that brief. When I looked under the energy one plan, it's the very last pages of a very long document. And so my concern is that when it's sitting wherever it is, that it can get sometimes lost. And I'm also concerned about it going to community development because I think that creates quite a local community focus, but we're a big population in Dunedin, and I'm not sure, that we can really fulfill the breadth of food supply and diversity of food supply that consumers of today expect to receive. So I think that, from those options, I suppose, I guess I'm unfamiliar with what the policy wing does and whether that would give it sufficient strength and to actually have that cross-sector approach.
Yeah, thank you. I guess that leads up to a very brief follow-up question. I think it was suggested earlier by Councillor Staines that perhaps there's an opportunity as we review our new strategies moving forward to try and stitch it into as many strategies as possible. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I prefer for it to be on its own because it could go across them. But I would like to see stronger statements made with some clear outcome measures. So like I said, if you're from that perspective that what gets measured gets done, then it doesn't fall off the there needs to be a clear strategy. It needs to be integrated. So I do agree with, health in all policies. So if you kind of approach it from that perspective of food and all policies. But with that also sometimes creates that it's kind of everywhere but nowhere as well. So I guess I'd like to see some clear strategic direction.
Cool, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your submission and for your presentation. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for your time. And yeah, appreciate you've done it hard the last 2 days. So thank you. Have a great evening.
Well, councillors, that brings us to the end of the second of 3 days. Thanks everyone for your ongoing engagement and stamina. We'll be back at 9:30 tomorrow morning. I'll move that we adjourn the meeting. Second, Councillor Gary. Those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? That's agreed.
Your Worship, I will give you the statistics for today.
Oh, I wonder what you've been doing up there.
We have a new leader in the most inquiring councillor. The lead has now gone to Councillor Houlihan.
With a handicap and everything. Extraordinary. Couldn't tell me.
In spite of your efforts.
Couldn't tell me these things. Thank you, Councillor Stones. Refreshing constant. See you all a pawpaw.